Welcome, everybody. We've got another exciting episode today. We've got Katie Paige with us. So Katie has a long history with the paranormal. She grew up on Clearview Ranch in Elbert County, Colorado, which is a location with a reputation for high strangeness that even precedes that of the infamous Skinwalker Ranch. Katie's also a director and lead investigator for the Colorado chapter of MUFON. She's appeared on a number of TV series about UAP, most recently on an episode of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. Katie's also authored a book based on the work of famed contact researcher Leo Sprinkle. She's currently working on a new book about her experiences growing up on the ranch. I'm Charles. This is my co-host, Dean. We're both editors of the Skinwalker Ranch subreddit. So, of course, a lot of our questions are going to be related to that, but people will probably be surprised how well the ranch kind of crosses over with these other topics. So sure. Let's dive in. Katie, tell us a bit about yourself that I might have missed.
Well, thank you, first of all, so much for having me on the show. It's a great honor to be here, and hello to all your wonderful listeners out there and people who are interested in all these topics. I mean, you know, when you said so many of these are connected, for me, it's been a very personal mission for me. I kind of started out in decades ago. I'm a big, and I admit I'm was a huge fan of the ghost hunters from the very beginning. And I've had so many paranormal things in my life, lived in haunted houses. I feel like something's been around forever, and you don't know, is this spirit from the spirit realm, or is this old family members or what? So I really kind of started in that realm of the paranormal, and out here in Colorado, we have the Stanley Hotel and so many great places to go investigate. And it got me and my older sister talking. We're like, what about all that stuff on the ranch? And what I really need the listeners to understand is I did not live on the ranch property full time. My mother worked for United Airlines as a computer operator. I was from Illinois. We moved out to Colorado in 1970. I was a very young girl, giving away my age here, but we moved out to Colorado in 1970. My mom started dating a gentleman from work after she divorced my father. And that gentleman owned the ranch property out there in Elbert County, Colorado. So here I am, a young girl. My sister, 6 years older, and we had many experiences both together and separate on the ranch property. It was a very eerie time during the mid to late 70s. So the really high activity was 1975 to 1978. This is where Linda Moulton Howe got her start out there. She was an investigative journalist at the time. And in fact, the sheriff of Elbert County, George Yarnell and Bill Waugh were featured in Linda Moulton Howe's film, A Strange Harvest. So we were threatened and warned never to talk about what happened out there on the ranch property. So for decades, as many of us do, we grow up, we get married, we raise families, we have careers, we have to provide and do the normal everyday things. But all those questions about all those things that were happening on the ranch never really left me. And I was watching a documentary on TV. I learned about MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, and I came in right as an investigator in 2012. And just opened that Pandora's box, and I've been investigating the ranch now for over a decade. And it's just been an incredible journey. And I never knew anybody knew anything about the ranch property. I never knew it was investigated, reported. I thought it was this big, weighted, heavy family secret that we had, because we were never allowed to talk about it. We were threatened and warned by my mom, by her boyfriend, by the other adults in the family, never to talk about what happened out there, along with this disembodied electrical voice. And we can get into that later, but it gave us a very clear warning never to talk about it. So one day in 2013, I picked up a book. And at the time, the Skinwalker Ranch, it really wasn't that well known. It didn't have a TV show or anything like that. I'm like, well, here's a book about a ranch where a bunch of strange stuff happened. So I picked up the book and I started reading the chapter Other Hotspots and started reading about a ranch in Colorado. And I knew the weird dynamic of the family, right? The three boys, the the father was dating my mother, the mother was dating another gentleman. It was this whole, I mean, it was the 70s, come on. So in that book, it stated that Dr. Leo Sprinkle, PhD, was one of the original investigators on the ranch. And first of all, I was like, wait a minute, somebody else knew about it and it was investigated. What? And then to find out it's Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who he was a psychologist and a pioneer in the field for abductees and contactees and past life regression and all that. And he lives just 2.5 hours away from where I lived in Colorado. So I wrote him, he's old school, wrote him a letter, got a letter back from him right away. Yes, this is the ranch, verified the location, the names of the people, and on and on and on. And, that next weekend I drove down and met Leo in person, pulled all the original documents from the ranch, and it's been full on since.
Can you tell us a little about the ranch, the name, and a little bit of the history, so people sort of understand the location and what you're referring to as the ranch?
Right. Well, in UFO folklore, it was known as the Clearview Ranch. I've also heard it referred to as the Rocky Mountain Ranch. Nobody ever knew the true location of the ranch. So as I first started investigating, I was like, wow, this is a mystery. Nobody ever wanted to, tell where the place was, because it's a very small rural town. And the sheriffs, even in the documents and the notes from Dr. Sprinkle, they didn't want the publicity. They didn't want the town known. I think their reputations were important. There was so much going on. They didn't want a whole bunch of people coming down to the town, but it's in Elbert County, Colorado, which is, if you go between Colorado Springs and Denver, Elbert County is halfway between. So back in the late 70s, the Air Force Academy had property that almost backed up to where the ranch sits. So there's many small towns in Elbert County, Colorado. There's Franktown, Elizabeth, Kiowa, Rama, all these little small towns. And what I've learned through the decade, this activity, although it was really high strangeness on the ranch property itself, which was 60 acres, it affected, I have a spreadsheet of an Excel spreadsheet of over 250 names on it of people that have had experiences in and around the whole county. So this just wasn't isolated to the property itself. And from, I did a lot of research too on just the history of the area itself, which, like so much of the Midwest is so much Native American, the Cheyenne, the Pawnee, the Kiowa, the Comanche, the Ute, all these tribes, the Cheyenne. And in fact, I just actually did we'll get into this too a little bit, but I just interviewed a young kid. Well, he's young to me. He's 29 years old. He grew up in the neighboring town of Elizabeth and has all sorts of paranormal things, both with UFO encounters, orbs, paranormal, you name it. And it's still going on to this day, which I find interesting. But what I found out as I'm interviewing him, he lived on the property where the Hungate family lived. And the Hungate family was a precursor to the Sand Creek Massacre, which was one of the most horrific, bloody massacres between, the white man and Native Americans here in Colorado. And the fact that this person, I think I'm allowed to say his first name, his name's Jesse, him and his friends lived on this property where the Hungate family was basically, the whole family was murdered and skinned. And I mean, it was brutal on both sides. And it kind of started that whole Sand Creek Massacre. So there's still experiences, things out there. So many high strangeness things, and I don't know where you guys want to start, but.
Well, I'd actually like to back up a little bit. So you mentioned, this was taboo. Your family was not supposed to talk about this. And you said that you were told not to talk about it. It sounded like you were indicating by the phenomenon itself. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's correct. And in fact, that's what scared me going back. So when I filmed with Beyond Skinwalker, that was the first time I had been back to the ranch. I've driven by it on the road. It is now gated, but I've never actually stepped foot on the property since that time when I was young. And there was a lot of apprehension going into it. I didn't know how I would feel. And I have to give the show a lot of credit because the people that own the ranch now, they bought it directly from the family that I came from, those people. And interestingly enough, I have reached out to the 3 boys. All the adults that were on the property back in the day, they're all deceased now, but the 3 boys are still alive. All 3 of them live out of state. I have only really been able to talk with the youngest son. And basically all 3 of the boys were so terrified and traumatized by what happened out on that ranch property that they don't want anything to do with it. They're very super religious. They basically, you know what, we don't want to touch the stuff. It's scary to them. And so they know that I've been researching it, but they have made it very clear to me that, you know what, we live this life now. We don't want to go back and deal with that. And I think for me, why I'm able to research it so heavily is because I am one step removed from it. I didn't live there permanently. But then it wasn't until Skinwalkers at the Pentagon came out, that second book by Kelm Kelleher and George Knapp, that this hitchhiker phenomenon kind of started coming out and people started talking about that. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because I always compartmentalized all these different phenomena. I'm like, okay, yeah, this happens at this, my house, the shadow beings and, the orbs and this and the paranormal. I didn't really connect it to the ranch activity until just recently, when other people, and that's why talking to other people is so important, right? So yeah, it's just crazy. But yeah, it was the boys' mother's birthday, and it was a weekend. My mom, my sister, and I have pictures of us. I don't know if they're sitting here, but I have pictures of all of us. Oh, here it is right here. I have pictures of all of us. I don't know if you could see this. This was like Thanksgiving. So it was like my mom, the boyfriend, this is the ex-wife. There's my mom's boyfriend. So these two are getting divorced. This is her new guy, and this is my mom. And these are the three boys and me. So we even had Thanksgiving together. This is, how it was. So, we were there for the mom's boy's birthday, and all the adults were at the ranch playing a board game till like midnight. It was really late. I'm the youngest of all the kids. So it was me, my sister, and the three boys were all hanging out in the ranch house, in the boys' bedroom, just being teenagers. And all of a sudden, one of the very first things reported on the ranch was this strange humming sound and these bangs that were coming from underground, which was very unusual. And sometimes that hum would get so loud that you couldn't hear yourselves talk over it. And it seemed like anytime that hum would start out, and it just sounded like this low pitched, like, it's a kind of low tone, something would happen. So anytime that started, everybody would get really uneasy. And you have to remember, this is the time where high mutilation, we're talking daily, these mutilations are happening of cow, sheep, horse, dog. People kept loaded 22 shotguns by their front door because they didn't know if they were going to humans next. I mean, everybody was on high alert. And what I come to find out later, they even had no-fly zones over the county. And they had helicopters up in the air. The police and the sheriffs were looking for the perpetrators of these mutilators. They had, at the time, $10,000 is a lot of money. And the Cattlemen's Association had these huge rewards out to catch the perpetrators of these mutilations. So you had people like watching the skies constantly, trying to figure out, they had theories back in the day, religious satanic cults, doing this, all sorts of things. I've come to my conclusion that is not the answer. In fact, these mutilations are still going on, not to the height they were there. So here we are, the hum starts up, all the lights in the house go out. We're terrified. The brightest light I'd ever seen, and I describe it like the sun sitting on the ground. No sound, there was no helicopters above us. And all of a sudden, out of every orifice in the house, it was like a disembodied electrical sounding voice basically said, and my sister and I remember this very well, it was terrifying. We have allowed you to remain. We've interfered with your lives very little. Your friends will be instructed to remain silent concerning us. And what was really fascinating to me, so John Schuessler, who's one of the founding fathers of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, and he's here in Colorado as well. When he found out about my connection to the ranch property, he bestowed upon me the original Apro briefing document on the ranch, written back in the 70s. And so when he gave me this, and I was stunned when I read this. But
before you get into that, can I just ask, so who wrote this? What is this document exactly? Is this a team that investigated this, or? Yeah,
this is Apro.
And what is Apro? Can you explain?
I knew you were gonna ask me that. It's it stands for Paranormal Research. I will have to look at that.
That's okay.
But yeah, I know it's an early it's like it's a precursor to like MUFON and stuff.
Okay, so this is an investigative team.
It's a whole team. It was throughout the country. So right here in the document, it says, we were sitting right in front of a console stereo and the voice came out of it. And I can almost recite the words exactly. So this isn't me. This is the adults at the time reporting this to Apro. And it says, attention, we have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Do not cause us to take action, which you will regret. Your friends will be instructed to remain silent concerning us. The exact quote was in this document. And I sat on the living room floor, called my sister on the phone. I'm like, you are not going to believe what's in this document. I mean, it was terrifying. So anyway, so we left that night, and that's really where the warning came from. And my mom took that very seriously. I mean, to the point where me and my sister were talking like in pig Latin to each other just so we could communicate what was happening. It was really, really, really a scary time out there. And for me, I think people can relate to this. When you go into like a haunted building or an old like a old scary cemetery or something, and your skin starts crawling and you feel like this heaviness. That's what it feels like to be on the ranch. And I was really curious when I just was revisited just this last year if I would feel that way again. And I did. It has not changed. I did not feel that way. I was lucky enough. Dwayne Ollinger invited me out to go see Blind Frog. And I went out to Blind Frog, sat in the waters there and everything. It did not feel that way to me. It felt actually very light and good at the Blind Frog Ranch. I'm curious about Skinwalker, how that would feel, if it feels heavy there or not. But just so much has happened out there, and I've just been trying to connect all these dots.
It's actually really interesting. The last episode of Skinwalker Ranch, or not Beyond Skinwalker, but Skinwalker Ranch last night, they were showing them in the helicopter. And all of the people in the helicopter started feeling pressure. They described it as like pressure in their chests. And they said, Brandon was like, I've never felt anything like this before. Mm-hmm. And they all felt it. And it correlated with rays on the noise floor across the entire spectrum. When they were up in the helicopter, there was it's pretty dramatic what happened in the episode.
Yeah. I don't have cable up here. I moved just recently up to the mountains. So I'm outside of Colorado Springs, outside of Woodland Park. So I'm here in the Rocky Mountains. I don't have cable, so I can't watch the episodes. I need to figure out how to stream them or something. But yeah, no, it's once you experience that heaviness, you never forget it. I mean, it just stays with you.
So I'm assuming you have a theory after all of these years of your own about what that was. What was that voice? Now, when you said it came through the stereo is how the adults described it, which, could be potentially, somebody with a high powered radio, you could do that.
Okay. Well, this brings me to my whole journey has been, and I think about this a lot. So some of the most shocking documents to me that I uncovered from Dr. Leo Sprinkles, and there were 3 PhDs out there. There was John Durr, PhD, and Peter Van Arsdale. John Durr's seismologist. So they had seismologists out there, but some of the notes at Dr. Sprinkles that I uncovered was Warren, and his last name was blanked out. Warren Blank from Camp Carson visits the ranch property, felt something take over his mind, would release him. So it made him walk towards the woods, would release him. He'd run back to the ranch house. And this did this to him 5 times, which, first of all, why is there a military person from Camp Carson on the ranch property? Why is something taken over his mind like MK Ultra? Why is the Air Force and NORAD involved in this? In Colorado Springs, we have NORAD. We have Camp Carson. We have Butte, which has one of the biggest collections of military helicopters out there. We have Francis Warren. We have the Colorado Air Force Academy. And we know through documents that the sheriffs and the people on the ranch were in communication not only with NORAD, but with the Air Force Academy. And there's documents saying Colonel so-and-so from the Air Force has said bluntly to forget about it, to shut up, that Air Force is handling the Bigfoot sightings and the UFOs. We know that Stapleton Airport at the time, this was before DIA, that they issued no-fly zones. They were picking up unusual things on radar. We know, so the fact that military is involved at all puts up red flags for me. And so my question has always been, how much of this is Black access projects, and how much of it is unknown paranormal UFO stuff, and which one came first, the chicken or the egg? Was this happening before the military got involved and they were aware of what's happening, so they started investigating it, themselves, and tried to keep it on the down low? Or was it the other way around? So that's one of my big missions has been. And so when you talk about disembodied electrical voices, that's one of the things I'm thinking, well, if they wanted to scare us off the property, or if they're running some sort of projects, that's something they can do easily. There's so many things that they could have done. And in fact, I mean, we're living in an exciting time right now with all these hearings and whistleblowers coming forward. And the one with just came out recent, was like 3.5 hours long, and they were talking about a Black access project that the military was running, where they were doing fake abductions, and and I was like, wait a minute, ding 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 ding, could that have been going on out there? But the thing that keeps me from thinking that is that property, before my mom's boyfriend's family bought it, it sat vacant for 10 to 12 years. So it sat there empty. And if the military wanted access to it to continue these projects, they would have just bought it, and they didn't, so it kind of doesn't make sense. And another thing I uncovered in looking at the documents, it was kind of known as the Mulligan Ranch, or the Mulligan Ranch, and it also was referred to something homestead. So I was looking at the provenance of the land itself, and I found an article about a gentleman named Dick Mulligan. And Dick Mulligan, in his later years, became a caretaker at the Winter Park Ski Resort here in the Rocky Mountains. And Dick Mulligan was born and raised on that very ranch property when he was a small boy in Elbert County. And I found it funny, and you can look it up on the internet if you just do a search on Dick Mulligan Winter Park. There's a quote that says, Dick Mulligan was known for his bold exaggeration and these wild storytelling and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, he wasn't telling stories. He was telling the truth, because he grew up on that crazy property and nobody believed him. So I thought that was funny. So my theory is that I think the activity's been going on for decades and decades. And I think that the military got wind of it, started to try and investigate it. And that's why they had a heavy presence there. The one thing I can't figure out, and maybe this has military involvement, is why did the activity increase by so much for that short amount of time? And it's still happening. And that was one question I had. Is it still happening? Yes, it is, but not to the degree that it was back then. And James Keenan, I was talking to him a little bit, and it was James Keenan that had a theory that a lot of these properties, Skinwalker, the ranch in Elbert County, and Blind Frog, and the other one up in Sedona, Bradshaw, and even Marley Woods, and a few other back east. There's the Ohio Pile property that's pretty active. They're all super highly magnetic areas. They ping the charts as being highly magnetic. And James Keenan was saying that it seems like the activity raises and decreases with the magnetic activity, or how close we are to the sun, and magnetic flares, solar flares and whatnot. And if a lot of people know, we're getting massive solar ejections right now and all that. And I'm wondering if that's why we're seeing an increase in activity. And I know that you guys, the show, Skinwalker Ranch show and all that, that's what they're trying to do. They're very scientific about what they're doing. And that's what I love about, the Skinwalker Ranch series and Beyond Skinwalker, is that they are trying to be scientific. And I really appreciate that. And that's why I appreciate MUFON. I know there's controversy out there about the Mutual UFO Network, but at the heart of it, it's a lot of volunteers out there just trying to answer questions like the rest of us. And we try to be as scientific and take a scientific approach to it the best that we can, but it's hard to do because it's such a, crazy topic that you can't control. You can't demand things to happen on camera.
Well, talking about the voice coming out of the stereo, and of course the first thing I said was, well, the government could potentially do this using technology.
Right.
At the same time, I'm a person who has done quite a bit of work with EVP. And so I know that you can get communication through electronic devices that way. What are you talking to is the question.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really interesting. So you started off with all of that. Now, one of the ideas, I don't know if you've talked about, is it potentially, did it ramp up because of the number of people who were on the property that were, is it like a consciousness amplifier kind of thing? So many people were on the property at the time. I mean, you had that photo with this big family gathering. They're all terrified of this thing. Could that maybe have raised up the activity to some degree? I don't know.
I don't know either. And that's another theory. I mean, there's been some good research by very credible people that talk about trauma and paranormal things, both with ghosts and ET and just unusual occurrences. I don't know if that plays a role in it. My thought is it's affected so many people and so many animals. Like, I don't think it's just the people on the ranch. And it's kind of interesting reading some of the original documents, because this family that bought the ranch, they came in from a city, and this is a small country town, and you know how rumors go. So some of the original documents are like, these hippies moved in, they're bringing drugs to the community and da, 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 da. And I'm like, I know these people. And the gentleman my mom was dating, she dated this gentleman for, 15 years. It wasn't like a short fling. He later became a police officer for the city of Aurora. I mean, this was not a gentleman who was doing drugs and making stories up. Now, that being said, the mother and the boyfriend were into some not so good things, which I just recently found out. There were some nefarious things that I just recently learned. This is sort of first time ever me talking about this on the air. But when I met the family that bought the property with cameras rolling, here's David Carr over there, and they got all the cameras rolling, and we're learning about each other. They're learning shocking things about, I brought all my documents. I'm like, here, I know you've lived here for 30 some years, but look at all this stuff that's happened here. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, and I'm learning from them. They're pulling out the original pictures, and I'm having memories and, all the stuff. And I find out from them that when they purchased the house, there were some not so nice things that they found on the property that I didn't even know about at the time, which were demonic in nature. I'll just put it that way. Carvings in the trees, stickers on the windows, those kind of things. And David Carr kind of sees me go like, he's like, what are you thinking? And I just didn't want to say it on camera, because I'm having all these memories and thoughts, and I'm thinking, I don't want anything negative or bad attached to me. And you have to really be careful, especially when you're in locations like that, what are you what are you dealing with? What are you opening up? And what is getting attached to you? And another thing, so that very first night filming, it was that night of the blizzard, whiteout. I wasn't prepared. It was very cold. I had this like 6 layers of clothes on, my vest, a jacket, and all this stuff. And the next day we had a day off of filming. So my daughter came down and we had lunch, and I went to the outlet stores in Castle Rock, and I'm like, okay, I need to buy like long john underwear and gloves and, new hat and all this stuff so I could be all warm for the show. And my back started bothering me. And I'm like, Jenna, is there something? And on my back, and it didn't make the episode, so I don't know if I'm getting into, I don't know. Anyway, but on my back it looks like 3 claws. It's like I don't know if it's a radiation burn or I got attacked by something on my back. And it's big. I have all the pictures. They did film it and they talked about it on the show. I don't know what that was, but it scared my daughter. And a matter of fact, my daughter's like, oh, I'd love to go visit the ranch. And in her head, and my daughter is 23 years old. She was born in 2000. In her head, she heard a very loud, like, no. In other words, don't go to the ranch property, as if something was warning my daughter not to visit the ranch. And she's like, Mom, we're going to go buy a white candle. You're going to ground yourself. You're going to protect yourself before you go back on that property. And we did. And I did from that day on. And then I got into like fighting mode, when I got there, because I'm like, if something's attaching to me, I'm grown up now and you're not going to mess with me, was sort of my attitude when they were filming,
And so, of course, this leads into the conversation about the hitchhikers. which, Colin Kelleher has been kind of one of the leading researchers who's at least been willing to talk about this. We know that they've been looking into it for a very long time. And it sounds like you were dealing with that since well before anybody was thinking about hitchhikers at Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, my whole life, pretty much.
So when you were having the phenomenon going on at the ranch, you said you weren't living there full time.
Right.
Did things follow you home? You started having experiences at your home.
Right.
Can you talk about some of those?
Yeah. Let me back it up a little bit, because I also find this piece a little interesting. So I was born in Illinois. My grandfather lived in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And interestingly enough, he had a sighting of an oblong-shaped craft over Lake Como that was investigated by J. Allen Hynek in the early 60s. My family, my mom and I, in Richmond, Illinois, going back and forth from Lake Geneva, had 2 sightings of this oblong-shaped craft. And she's like, Katie, that one time we pulled over the side of the road and you were like catatonic. We had to shake you because you were like, hello, hello, hello. So that's sort of like the story that we hear around Christmas dinner and Thanksgiving my whole life. So that kind of came with us to Colorado in 1970. Both my grandfather and my father are Navy in the Navy. And then, the ranch stuff starts up. So it was a very traumatic time for me. Parents divorced. It was not a good, happy time. All this crazy ranch stuff starts. So I never slept alone after that scary night. I always slept with big sister, but had shadow beings, and they came in 2s or 3s always, like peeking inside the doorway, standing next to my bed, at the foot of the bed, at the side of the bed. Always checked, like you do when you're little kids, you look under the bed. I'm 9, 10, 11, 12 years old during these years. Footsteps all the time, things being moved. The big blue basketball size orb that I experienced. Now, interestingly enough about the blue orb, that didn't happen until 2013. When I started investigating the ranch again, things started happening again. Things are happening here in this house. Just today, stuff's happening. So I don't know what that is. I don't know what I'm dealing with.
So let's slow down a little bit. There's a lot to unpack there. And this is one of the most fascinating subjects that our audience has, and fans of the show. You've got 12, 13 million people watching the show every week, right? Yeah. And they never mention the Hitchhiker Effect at all. Brandon told us that the History Channel doesn't allow them to discuss it.
Yeah, they don't like that.
Did they kind of discourage you from talking about your hitchhiker experiences?
Yeah,
because it didn't get mentioned. It didn't get mentioned on Beyond Skinwalker either.
No,
and this is a huge part of the phenomenon, isn't it?
No, it's a huge piece of the puzzle, huge. And they were very clear about that. And I understand, like History Channel, they want to keep it very scientific based. They don't want to get too far into woo-woo stuff. And I appreciate that, because I kind of live in both worlds. Like, yes, I experience the stuff, but I also love documents and research and all that, because I want to understand what's happening to me, but I also want to know, like, what's what's with the military and what are they doing out there, and MK Ultra and all that. And I think honestly, when it comes to the mind and what we can manifest, and I've come to believe, and not only in UFOs but in the paranormal world and in the Bigfoot world, I we had the Sasquatch creatures out on the ranch, and we could talk about that, but I think we as humans, every person on the planet can do this. You can manifest things to happen. You can create things to happen. And I noticed this actually back on watching the Ghost Hunters, because I was uber fan. And I always wondered, like, why do all these things happen to Jason and Grant, and it doesn't happen to Amy and this other person, because they don't believe it. And it seemed like the people who believed it would have experiences, and the people that didn't. I'm like, there has to be something to that, right? And when you're a child, you're open to everything. Right? You don't know. Children are magical. So they have all of these experiences, right? And spirits can connect with them more easily, and the paranormal can interact with them more easily, and you're more open to things. And so perhaps that's part of the answers. I don't know.
Well, I think so, because you basically are saying that, when you're a kid and you have these experiences, you can't unsee it.
Right.
And it's not like a belief or a story you've heard. It's an actual experience. So even before you got to Colorado, you'd had some experiences.
Yeah.
And then you get on the ranch and you have some experiences, and then you go home. And can we get into some details here? So you're in your bed at night with the door open, and the shadows come in, and are you awake? Are you sleeping and then they wake you up? Or are you already awake before they, How does that actually work? Tell us how the Hitchhiker Effect actually works.
Right. So the scary night with the disembodied voice, that whole thing, when we got home to our house, so it's my mom, my sister, and I. And the house that we lived in, you walked in the front door and there was a staircase that went up, and then we had a living room over here and a dining room over here kind of house. And I remember walking in the door and collapsing right there on the living room floor that night. And I couldn't speak. I was like paralyzed. And my mom and my sister are yelling at me, Katie, Kate, what did you eat? What did you eat? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And I'm trying to say peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I couldn't say it. And that lasted, I don't know, maybe a full minute or something. And then I got really bad tunnel vision. I remember them taking me up to my bedroom, and I got my first full-blown migraine headache that night. And I suffered migraines weekly, like severe, where you get the tunnel vision, the vomiting, that whole thing. You can't get out of bed for a day. After that night on the ranch property, for a year and a half, to where it was really disabling my going to school and everything. And it was my mom finally heard about biofeedback training, which was new back then. You know, this is like 1977. She hears about biofeedback training. So I went through that for a year and I got control of the headaches. But from that night on, it was severe migraines, these shadow beings. And yes, it was like, you know, when you're just starting to go to sleep, you know, and you would see them under your peripheral vision, just a shadow, and you turn and boom, and it would just like go, you know. So they were tall. I mean, I'm a kid, but I would have to say they're like 6 feet tall, 6.5 feet tall, these shadow beings in the doorways at the foot of my bed. And I just remember yelling at Chris, what is that? And I'd pull the covers up over my head and just try and will myself to go to sleep, you know, that kind of thing.
So it wasn't paralysis. You know, that's the question everybody always asks. How do you know you weren't dreaming? Was it paralysis?
Oh no, I wasn't asleep. I wasn't asleep yet. It was like before I went to sleep. You know,
how did they go away? How did you get rid of them?
By looking. So it's like, you know, when you see things that, and if you look, in a matter of fact, just the week before I started filming for Beyond Skinwalker here, and you know how they film for like a full week. And I'm really happy now that they let me stay in Castle Rock and not here, because I living by myself up here at the time. And the week before that same thing happened, it was about the size of a little bit bigger than a baseball. And it was just a white orb, and it was next to my bed, and I could see it very clearly right here. And I knew as soon as I turned my head to look full on it, it would be gone. I just watched it for as long as I could out of my peripheral. I'm like, what is this ball of light? And I turned, and it went, boom.
Was it shining? I mean, like, was the room
illuminated? It was a bright ball of light, like that light right there. It was like just a light bulb. Ball of light. And interestingly enough, the very first thing we filmed out there was at this old bar in the town of Elbert. And the bar owners, after we had filmed, and what was so funny, so I chose to sit at the table here, and Andy sat here, and then Andy's like, I want to switch. So we switched spots, and to do that first initial interview where they kind of learned about, you know, my childhood and what happened on the ranch. And I get up from filming, and the lady that owns the bar says, you're not going to believe this, but after the bar closed last night, we had a round white ball of light sitting right where you're sitting. And I'm like, what?
You mean your seat?
And where I was sitting to do the interview with the film crew. The night before, after the bar closed, there was a white ball of light right where I sat. And it freaked me out because I knew what had just happened at my house up here.
What happened at your house?
Other than the white ball of light that was in my room. And I'm
but you also mentioned Hitchhiker Effects. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
and
you're still getting, even today you had something happen?
Yeah.
What happened today?
Today the TV's on. TV came on by itself. So I just moved my fiance in here. Just this last couple of weeks, he moved from Virginia out here. And we had this was a few days ago, we had just put a bunch of pictures on the wall, and 3 of them all at the same time flew off the wall. And we heard a whistle in the room. So I'm like, okay, that freaked me out. So just today, I was folding laundry in the laundry room downstairs. He's in the music studio, and the TV came on, the big TV in the family room. And I'm like, I don't know. That's never happened before. And that just happened today.
So you've seen electronic issues as well with electronics.
A lot. Yeah.
Even in the past, I mean, batteries dying and all that.
Yeah, all the time. I don't know. And then to have what happened on that episode happen to me, which was, they had brought in a ham radio operator and they set up this experiment to see if so here's what I didn't know either, behind the scenes thing. But, I was super nervous going to the ranch for the first time. And I was really anxious because it was getting dark by the time we got there. It was dusk, and I wanted to get on the ranch property before the sun set so I could see what I remembered, how I remembered the house to be. And they had the camera rolling, and none of this made it either. But I recognized the big tree. I recognized the silo. I recognized so many different things, but the house was in the same place, but it looked different. And what I come to find out later that night is that they added an addition to the left and to the right and to the front of the original structure, but the original structure is still within the additions of the house. And so what they did is they put this communication device to see if the house would communicate the original house. So they put that in the original structure, wired it out, and they had all these monitors. I don't know how any of this works. I'm not a scientist, but the ham radio guy's on there. I don't remember his name. Sorry, guy. I don't remember your name, but he's like, hey, blah, 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 does this call thing. And, we're here. Are you going to communicate? Blah, blah, blah. Nothing. And David Carr goes, hey, I have an idea. This is Katie's kind of experience. Let her do it. Right. So I'm like, hey, remember me? I'm back. Remember my sister? And boom, everything just started going. And what also didn't make the episode, they were getting transmissions in the radio from Vietnam War. And also like, we're back. They remember there was voices coming through the radio. And I was shocked that didn't make the episode, because I was like, but you're right. History Channel doesn't want to touch that stuff. So and not only did I repeat it once, twice, 3 times on the radio. So they're like, get the guys from outside. They got to see this. But then as I'm waiting and they're talking and they're like, we need to tell Brandon about this. I'm like, just talking to the house without the radio. And it still was responding without the radio.
Wow,
so
how did you feel?
I felt like I was in fighting mode, because you have to remember, right before that, I just found out the information that wasn't so good about what the owners had found when they moved here. And that was in my mind. So here I'm thinking, if something bad has attached to me, I was like kind of, and I don't know if you could tell on that episode, but I kind of got into this, like, I'm grown now and I'm going to protect myself. And that's how I feel now, even today. Like, I'm like, what is this? Like, who are you? What are you? What do you want? Is this a warning? What's going on? I don't know. I don't know. It's scary sometimes.
Wow.
I just wanted to say, your comment about how you kind of appreciate that they've got this, they're trying to stick to the scientific view. But I do have to say it's frustrating too, because when they say they don't want to talk about the woo, I kind of feel like it's a show about cars, but they said we're not going to talk about the engine or the tires, right? And they've just kind of arbitrarily said this is a distinction, because, we interviewed Brandon and Eric, and, we got to ask them, what do you think is going on? They're like, we think it's non-human intelligence. They were just very frank about it and open, but you don't get that when you watch the show. It's like they're trying to figure out what it is, and it's like they kind of know what it is. They're just trying to prove it right now. But the phenomenon seems to be conscious, and it toys with you and it messes with you. And, the whole thing about you turn to face it and it's gone.
It's gone.
Things happen out of sight. They happen when the camera is turned off, and that is kind of the epitome of the paranormal, isn't it? When you investigate this stuff, it always happens where you can't document it, or in a way where you can explain it away.
Yeah. It's almost as if they want you to come to the conclusion of faith or belief or whatever yourself. Like, we're going to give you little glimpses of things, but it's up to you to believe it and to take it further into, I don't know, it's like a magical kind of thing. And like I said, you really have to be careful with it. I don't come from a very religious background. My mother was very curious. So she would change religions like people change their socks or something. It's like, what are we this week, Mom? Kind of thing. So come from a very open view with that. And interestingly enough, through my work with MUFON and experiencers, just getting to know people and talking with people, which is my favorite thing to do, is to hear and make all those connections. So many people that do have these types of contact are very open-minded, are very, are not really dogmented into little boxes. So I find that kind of interesting. And maybe they reach out and seek out people that have more open minds. And I don't know what that is, why they can't just land on the White House lawn and go, hey, this is who we are and what we're doing. I don't know if there's rules put in place. Those are those big questions in life. I don't know. But yeah, and I compartmentalized it all until just recently. So for me, it's sort of like processing my own personal things, researching, processing. It goes like that for me, because it still does affect me and it still does touch me. And I need to be really careful with it, because I don't know what I'm dealing with it with.
It's amazing you haven't had any health effects, from the book Skinwalkers, the Pentagon. People who've seen those blue orbs have actually had some serious health effects.
Oh, I've had health effects.
So, you have?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think it's because, do you believe it's, but do you connect
I don't know.
the
one time, I don't know if he'll even remember, but I talked to Travis Taylor one time because I saw a presentation of his in Laughlin I went to, and I kind of pulled him aside, and I got in a car accident in my Jeep a couple of years ago, and I got rear-ended pretty badly and had a lot of issues. So I had a CAT scan of my head done from whiplash and all that stuff. And I have this white matter thing. So he was showing brain scans of people that have what is it called? The something effect, I'll think of the name of it. But I told him, I'm like, he was
Havana
talking
syndrome?
about Havana, that's it. Thank you. The Havana syndrome. And he's like, here's the brain scans from Havana syndrome. I'm like, well, here's my brain scans, and they match. I'm like, what does that mean? Because when I got the scans back, I was like, does this mean I'm going to have Alzheimer's or memory loss? And my memory does, like, it's hit or miss sometimes because of the trauma with that stuff. And the migraine headaches and rashes and like a lot of like nerve kind of things. And so, yeah, I've had different things throughout the years that I've dealt with that I've heard others have too. So I don't know if that's connected or just coincidence. There's so many different things. So many wild coincidences and things like that seem beyond chance keep happening. Those kind of things, you hear that with experiencers too. Lucid dreaming, where that's been a joke in my family for decades. I got to finish my dream or redream a dream, because I go and I do dream control all the time and have since I was little. So I don't know if that's a piece of it either.
Wow. So do you feel connected all the time to this phenomenon? Do you feel like there's a connection, like it's aware of you and knows where you're at, and there's some communication going on? Is there a presence in your home?
That was the biggest thing. I always felt watched when I was young, especially during the ranch years when all that was happening. So much so, like, why? And I joke about it now, but it was no joke back then because I was constantly in fear all the time. But when I walked back and forth to my elementary school, if a car would drive by or a motorcycle was really bad because they can go up on the grass, I pretended like I lived at the house that I was closest to, and I would walk up to the door as if I lived there because I was afraid of being taken. So I was constantly afraid of being taken, and I don't believe that I was taken. I don't claim that I'm an abductee or anything like that. Like I have dreams of being aboard a craft. And when Dr. Leo Sprinkle put me under for an hour and a half, he hypnotized me because he's like, oh, you spent time on the ranch, I would love to put you under. And I'm like, okay. So I did. Took me like a week to listen back to that tape, and it was kind of unnerving to listen back to it. And I say some things and I'm like, huh? Anyway, but I don't have like waking memory of like, come on board the craft and that kind of thing. So I'm kind of on the fence about that whole thing. I don't know if those are just dreams or what that is.
Well, and I know you can talk about this because of your friendship with Dr. Sprinkle. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly common with experiencers. This type of contact very frequently seems to happen when you're in those twilight states, hypnagogic, hypnopompic. altered states. Now there's a lot of research going on with psychedelics, people using DMT,
Right.
and they're reporting what seem to be the same entities that people have been reporting for decades, contacting,
Right.
associated with UAP. Now, you said you've got some theories about abductions that may be controversial or different. So maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Travis Walton is a friend, and I believe, he had his experience in 1975, and I believe Travis, and I believe many other abductees out there. For me personally, I since I don't have that waking, vivid, like, hey, and it is like a dream state for me. And a matter of fact, in my book, that's one of the chapters, dreams or memories, because so many people wrote to Dr. Sprinkle from around the world stating just that, like, it was the most vivid dream I ever had. It felt so real. Was it a dream or was it a memory? It's that for me as well. And so I don't know what that is. And it makes me question and doubt my own memory in my own experience. Like, I don't know if I was taken aboard a craft or not. And I think so many contactees you talk to, they're uncertain too, and that's why they're seeking out answers and they want confirmations. And it's so difficult because if you look at abductees encounters, they all vary from one another. They have some things that are similar and common, but they're so unique to the experiencer, which makes me wonder, with like the DMT and the psychedelics, is it something that we're creating in maybe we astral travel when we lucid dream, or when we dream and we're astral traveling ourselves onto a craft. Maybe that's part of it too. I don't know.
I tend to subscribe to Jacques Vallée's theories, where there's a very strong link between our subconscious and the phenomenon. There's this interplay that goes on. It takes things out of our subconscious and feeds them back to us.
Yeah. We're co-creators.
Yeah. So myself, I
Mm-hmm.
had an experience, a conscious, wide awake experience when I was 6. I saw what I only learned a couple of years ago was, I believe, a mantis being in a cornfield in Pennsylvania. I did some hypnosis more recently, and of course, a bunch of stuff came up about abductions. And I'm like you, I'm like, I don't know what it is. It correlates very, very highly with other experiencers, and I feel like I didn't know that stuff at the time.
Right.
But how can I possibly prove it? I mean, I worked with a remote viewer who had done contract work for the CIA, and she was like, yeah, I looked at it, this for sure, blah, blah, blah. But that's not proof.
Right.
And very, very rarely do you get any sort of physical evidence that goes along with abductions. But there is trace evidence, and Vallée talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's not definitive. And I think so many experiencers are kind of watching to see what happens with disclosure right now, because they not only, are talking about UAP, but they're talking about aliens, right?
Right.
But I don't see any way that the government is going to acknowledge abductions. How could they? Like, how could they admit to the public, this thing has been going on and we knew about it, and
we let them do it, especially with Eisenhower. Yeah.
Or they can't do anything about it, if they're real. So, but people are going to ask those questions, and I'm really nervous to see what that narrative is going to be.
Did you say you had these experiences in Pennsylvania? Because
yes, and I threw that in there, that detail, because I know that that's something that you've looked into.
Yeah, Ohio, Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
there's the UFO creature case out of Ohio, Pennsylvania. So yeah, this stuff happens. Just did a podcast out of the UK. Well, actually, I did the pre-podcast. I'm doing the podcast tomorrow night out of the UK. And the gentleman doing that podcast lives by a very high strangeness location out there as well. I just did a documentary on it, on what was pretty much like the dog man. They call it the wolf man out there, but same thing, orbs, UFOs, all these kind of things. So this is a phenomenon that happens around the world. And there's just too many people both with Sasquatch, all these different things. And it's taken me a while. I'm pretty hard-headed and stubborn. So it takes me a lot of proof and a lot of people to tell me to go, maybe there's something to this, and same with the Sasquatch, like out in Elbert County where the ranch is, this is not like the Rocky Mountains. It's not what I call a squatchy area. Like in Bailey, where Jim has his Sasquatch outpost in the museum, it's very wooded. Out in Elbert County, there's a lot of open fields, and there are these big patches of ponderosa pines. And there happens to be a large area of ponderosa pines right behind the ranch house, right? And that was really super scary back in the day. And that's where I encountered this disappearing box in the daytime. That's a whole other thing I didn't talk about for a long time because it was so strange. Were these boxes that were seen out on the property that would disappear?
Hovering?
And mine was hovering. I saw it. It was like 3 to 4 feet off the ground, and it was in the daytime, and it made this bee sound, like an electrical, like if you stand under power poles, that kind of sound. And when you got close to the box, it would change tone or frequency into like an angry bee sound, and then those boxes would disappear. This was witnessed not only by all the adults in the house and some friends. I witnessed it along with the youngest son and my mom's boyfriend at the time in the pickup truck we were driving behind the ranch house. That's why in that episode we went back in the wooded area, because they were, where did you see this? And I was taking them back where I saw that box. But not only that, but when I got the documents, the undersheriff, Bill Waugh, witnessed this box. He was out on patrol, and the patrol car saw the box there next to a tree. He was afraid to approach it. So he saw lights on it, heard the noise, went back to get his posse sheriff to go with him to approach the box. And he said when he got back, not only did he witness the box, but the tree next to it appeared to go into the ground. So,
okay, I have to ask, I have heard another account involving a box making bee sounds that was associated with a Bigfoot sighting, a Sasquatch
these
sighting.
These are two.
But the one that I was hearing, and maybe it's the same story, this person described like hearing voices or something, and they zapped, like a UFO, like zapped this Bigfoot and vaporized it.
That's the ranch.
That
was in the report. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I've heard this story. I just didn't realize it was.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I'm you're frying my brains here. So. A UFO zapped a Sasquatch?
This happens all the time.
After a box. Yeah. That sounds like bees.
Yeah. No, it's in here. It's in here. And I couldn't believe when I was reading it. And so this box, the one I saw in the daytime, the adults saw it behind the ranch house, okay, at night. And according to the adults that reported this, I didn't witness this, I'm just reading what it says, that the ETs basically said that box is lethal and we can prove it to you. So they had one of the Sasquatches approach the box, and that box started making that tone, and it dropped it to its knees. And what's fascinating about the story to me, which gives it credibility, is my sister, my big sister, she went to the high school prom with the youngest or the oldest son that lived on the ranch. And after prom, so, they went, this is the small town. There's like 7 people in the graduating class. So after the prom, they went to the ranch property at night. My sister was terrified. And she will matter-of-factly tell you that the Sasquatch that were seen on that property were directly connected to the craft, to the UFOs, and that they were either like workers or bodyguards, something like. And what's fascinating too, and I know it's controversial for a lot of people out there, but there's a whole book about it, Stan Gordon did, that some of these Sasquatch creatures are connected directly to UFOs and craft. I don't know if they're ETs themselves, but in the case of the ranch, it appeared to my sister that they were like bodyguards or workers. And that would make sense with that story that they dropped it to its knees. In other words, it was like a worker or like almost a slave type of being.
Slave to who? Are you talking the Greys?
Well, so there were 2 types of beings that were reported being seen on the ranch property. And they were sketches in Dr. Sprinkle's archives. And so I have them here. Hold on. I got all sorts of documents. I was stunned to find out how many articles were written back in the day about The area, just tons and tons. One thing that was this mysterious blanket of metal found out there at the time. They had pictures of the metal. Really interesting.
What?
Unmarked helicopters, helicopters chasing people and menacing people. But here's a picture, original picture of the Sasquatch being seen out there at the time. When I was a kid, they called them white fuzzies because they had like dark gray hair, not brown. And interestingly enough, I got an email from Bob Solis, who said that there were airmen stationed at Malmstrom in Montana at the same time in 1977 that were being questioned with polygraphs by the military, seeing these same creatures. And they had a sketch of one, and it was identical to this. I mean, almost identical. It would blow my mind.
Can I stop you there just for a second? The rumor is that the Greys don't have nipples, a navel, or genitalia, or an anus.
Right.
That they're sort of biologically engineered. What about your fuzzy? Was it furry fuzzy? What was it?
White fuzzy. They called them white fuzzies. I don't know.
He wasn't wearing any pants. He wasn't wearing any pants.
No.
Was it a he, she? You know what I'm saying?
I don't know.
Was there any ever, navel, nipples, genitalia of any kind ever observed? I'm wondering if these are genetically engineered like the Greys, if they exist.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't witness these with my own eyes, so I don't know.
Well, the famous the Gimlin film, Bigfoot, Patty, as they call her.
Right.
And they call her Patty because she appears to have breasts. And
Right.
people do describe sexes on Bigfoot sightings.
That's true.
And it's shocking, how common Bigfoot sightings are associated with UAP.
Right.
And, it's such a source of ridicule. Oh, you're going to tell us UAP are real? Next, you're going to be telling us it's Bigfoot. And it's kind of like, well.
And they're seen in these balls of light, and they disappear in balls of light. And what's that about? You hear those reports. I've heard those reports before, that you'll see, somebody will have a Sasquatch encounter, and they'll have these orbs or balls of light, and they'll see them in connection with Sasquatch. So I don't know if there's anything to that. Now, the two ET beings that were spotted there, this was interesting. This is the original drawing that was in Dr. Sprinkles. And I kept this in my back pocket for a long time because I had never seen anything quite like it before.
Can you bring that up to the camera so we can see it?
Yeah, I'm going to get the smaller one, the original
okay.
one here. There was these very strange, spindly looking creatures with these tubes, and this was like a helmet over the head, these long arms, and then this shield was described as coming out to a point. You really can't tell in this drawing that was drawn. And then the other type of being seen out there was a Nordic, the blonde, blue-eyed Nordics. And it is said in this report from the ranch that these two were in conflict with one another. In other words, we're here having our conflict. These guys seemed really AI to me. This drawing, so I got to tell you this. So at the time, I was a guest speaker coordinator for Colorado MUFON, and I invited a gentleman by the name of Sean Bartok to come give a presentation for our group. And he wrote a book called Flashbacks. And in his book, he said that the location of his property was in Castle Rock, Colorado. I come to find out that his property was only 14 miles away from the ranch property of my childhood. So I've gotten to know him pretty well. He uses a pseudonym for his author name, and the location of his property in the book is somewhere different to protect his property. And come to find out, what he experiences was almost identical to the ranch property, just crazy stuff. And so I'm sitting in the third row just watching his presentation, and up pops a sketch of these ET beings in the 70s that he had encounters with. And I hope that I have it in here. My jaw was on the floor. This is one of them. The one on the left was his guy with his tubes. But let me find the other one. They almost look identical. They had the same eye shape, the same heavy brows, the same wrinkles around the face. And I'm just like, how is this even possible? Shoot, I don't have his on here.
Yeah, consistency like that is really interesting. If you've got multiple sites, multiple witnesses that don't even know each other over years, and they actually draw the same kind of an object, That's a lot harder.
I mean,
understand.
this guy, with the tubes, and I really
what are
felt
the
these
tubes?
guys were. I felt like these guys were like AI type of beings, like very mechanical. And then I'm thinking like the mechanical boxes and the voices, are they connected to these guys?
You mean android?
Yeah,
like not
androids.
Biological, like a machine, like a robot.
Like machines. Yeah, they're like machines.
So what are the tubes? Is there a helmet? And then the tubes are like going from the head down to the shoulders?
I mean, the way they drew it, I mean, I didn't witness these guys. This is what was in the files. I don't know if they attached to the back, or I have no idea.
And they have no hands?
I don't know. They didn't draw any. So
out.
I don't know.
Maybe the witness didn't remember the details on
Another thing they talk about in the documents here, they used to bait the property with silver and turquoise, and the activity would raise when they would put silver out there. And interestingly, so I had this custom Celtic bracelet that was sterling silver that I've worn for 8-9 years. I've never lost it. And when we were out there filming, lost it on the ranch. I'm like, the ranch show up. Took my bracelet, my Celtic bracelet is gone.
Well, I commented a second ago, I said, that drawing, it reminds me of a Kachina doll. Native American Kachina dolls. And of course, the Native Americans, silver and turquoise is incredibly important to their culture.
Right.
And all of these sites that we're talking about have a very long history of Native American. And the Native Americans had a lot of stories of beings. I talked about a mantis being, but what was it? The Hopi have myths of the ant beings.
Right. He looks like that.
Yeah. And it's just, when you follow the threads on these things, and that's what you have to do, when you start investigating this.
Right.
They talk about the rabbit hole, and it just keeps going and going, but all of the stuff ends up tying back together in some way. You'll go down some total diversion, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, this ties back to this other thing that seemed completely unrelated at the time. For example, Bigfoot and UFOs. I was just talking to somebody the other day who's really into the Law of One. Is my sister, actually. Hi. And she was noting that in the Law of One, they say that Bigfoot are flying the UFOs.
Could be.
Now, I'm not a Law of One person myself, but what a weird thing to be in there. But
I've asked that. Yeah. If they're the ETs themselves or work. I mean, I don't know. That could be. They could be flying them, the pilots. I'm having technical issues right now. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, yes. We can hear you. We can hear you fine. What's interesting? You might have a hitchhiker messing with your mic or something. You okay on that side?
These just went quiet, so I don't know.
Oh, can you hear us?
I can, kind of. Yeah.
Okay. This must be really validating for you, because you had all these experiences as a kid, and then you find out that the adults, the grown-ups at the time, were documenting all this. And then Skinwalker Ranch happens, because this is all in the 70s.
Yeah.
And then in the 90s, the Shermans on Skinwalker Ranch, and the parallels are stunning. They saw the boxes, the noises under the ground, the buzzing, orbs. I mean, the list goes on and on. What about cryptids? Did you have any cryptids?
Yeah, there were reports of these large birds, and even Sean Bartok in his book Flashbacks would see like these phoenix type birds or pterodactyl type birds out there. So large birds were spotted out there, strange different animals. And there was that weird experience. We were out there doing readings around, interestingly too, like all the old structures on the property where the silo sat, where the well is, where the cistern was, the old foundation of the house. All of the old locations from the 70s had very high readings, and all the new structures did not. So I found that interesting. And when we were out there with our little headlamps on and we're exploring the property, and I'm like kind of uneasy because it's dark, it's my first time back. I see what was bigger than a rabbit and smaller than a fox, an animal run by. It's not a dog. It wasn't a cat. I don't know what it was. And I'm just like, where did it just scurry off to? And the footprints just like disappeared. And then when we went back to where I saw that box and we went over the barbed wire, we're walking and I'm ahead of everybody. So I'm walking in front, Andy and Paul are behind me and the crew and the cameras. And all of a sudden it's like pure whiteout snow. And then these tracks appeared and they were bipedal. They were not like animal tracks. They were one in front of the other. and then they disappeared and reappeared and disappeared. And that made the episode. You could see that in that episode. And that was so strange right in front of our faces. We're like, holy cow. What's that? They just appeared out of nowhere, walked, disappeared, as if coming up out under, like something's underground, which brings me to another point that, and I think they did a little clip. Somebody had sent me a clip where they shared that they did have the biggest remote view on that property in the history of the United States. When we were there, they had David Morehouse, and they had over 70 remote viewers from around the world remote view that location, that ranch location. And so they had David Morehouse there, and he had a PowerPoint presentation set up where he went through the whole process of remote viewing, how they did it, what the results were. And again, talk about validation. My jaw was on the floor because I literally left there. I was calling my sister. Could this not, like, are they faking this? This can't be real, because the hits were so accurate. And so not only they remote viewed above the ranch, at different elevations on the ranch, and then underneath the ground. And it was really interesting to me that a lot of the hits all corresponded around the ponderosa pines in these sections of trees. And how would they know that? They're given just a white sheet of paper, basically, where you can't, they don't have, it could be in Australia for all they know. They have no idea if they're over the ocean or where they are. And they got the Rocky Mountains, the silo, they knew, the ranch, they got boxes that making electrical noises. They got military or police people. They got ETs, UFOs, all this kind of stuff. And I'm watching this just like, what?
Now, have you ever tried remote viewing yourself or anything like that?
Yeah.
And how was your success rate?
Really good. So there's a big group in Denver. It's the Denver Paranormal Psychic Development is called. So every Friday night they'd go meet at this local location, and we would sit in a circle and try practice psychic readings on each other, and remote viewing and different little things. And I did this for a number of years. I'd go every Friday and just kind of work with those different things. And I had a lot of success, so much so that a lot of times you ask me if I have this all the time. I do, but I try to unplug it. I look at it like an outlet, like where you can plug it in, and when you're plugged in, all this stuff happens. So I like to unplug it most of the time because it gets overwhelming. It's too much.
Now, do you feel like that was an ability you had before you ever got contact with the ranch?
Yeah, my earliest memory of that is at like 3-4 years old back in Illinois. Yeah.
Because there is a high correlation between psi abilities and these types of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And, as you said, all back at the beginning, the whole chicken and egg thing,
right.
And the association with trauma and PTSD. How are all these things connected? It's been such a heavy topic of research, and even after all these decades, I don't know if anybody's got any conclusions.
Right. No, I definitely believe all of that is connected. And just, getting our reports, being the state director for Colorado MUFON, I see all the reports coming in all the time. And you have this phenomenon with UFO sightings where you can be in a group of people. This time of year, people are out camping, right? And you will have people who will have sightings, and even close encounter sightings of orbs and UFOs and things they can't explain. And, this person here has this very unbelievable encounter, and this person over here doesn't, right? Or they'll see glimpses of it, but it doesn't affect them like this person, and why the difference? Why is it affecting a certain person so differently than the other person? And in fact, when we were shooting the rockets out on the ranch property, there was a gentleman there. I'm not going to name his name or anything, but one of the rocket people had an experience at Skinwalker Ranch when they did the rockets, and a very physical one. And then had that same experience in Elbert County. Felt like he got, literally I saw him double over, like somebody just punched him in the gut. So very physical. And David and the crew took notice and we're talking to him. And I said, I have a really weird question for you. And everybody's like, oh, I'm like, do you have any military connection? And right as he's saying it, I said, Navy. And I hear that a lot with experiencers. It's either Navy, Air Force, sometimes Marine, sometimes Army, but you really hear Navy the most for whatever reason, Navy, Air Force, those two. And I don't know. And I wonder if ET, if we are being visited by whatever, if they're interested in our military men and women and their families. It would make sense to me if we're going to go visit another planet that maybe we would be interested in their military complex and what they're doing and why. I don't know. It's just a theory I have.
A lot of connection with people who've got family members in the intelligence community.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Navy intel as well.
Yes.
Because you mentioned your dad and your grandfather, I think,
yes.
were Navy. Did they ever mention anything where they might have been associated with things they couldn't talk about?
My grandfather, a little bit, just because of the things in Lake Geneva over Lake Como and that I remember, but he passed when I was just very young, but I heard it through my father. My father, not a very reliable witness, so to speak. I mean, he had his problems with alcohol and things like that. So I don't know. But I've heard it from a lot of other people, so much so that I just make note of it every time I talk to an experiencer or, anybody that has these. I'm like, do you have this connection? And oh yeah, I do. And I'm like, well, that's really interesting. I don't know what that's about. And not to get into it, and I don't like to get into it too much, but with the Black Access projects, and this is something I've thought a little bit about, Black Access projects and MK Ultra, they would take people out of the state hospitals oftentimes to do these different experiments with. My half brother at the time was in Pueblo State Hospital. And I find that an interesting connection as well. He burnt down 2 of our houses. He was an arsonist. So I had that trauma going on as well. But he was in the state hospital. And I'm like, is there a connection between that? I'm always trying to draw these connections. And I don't know if there was. I'm just stating that is another piece that I find kind of intriguing with the weird dynamics of what was going on.
Yeah. Do you think that the military and the phenomenon have some kind of a cooperation or partnership, like they're sort of working together, like the cattle mutilations? You believe that some of those were potentially done by the government?
Potentially. I thought that for a long time. I'm not
some of them, right?
Yeah. I'm not an expert on the cattle mutilation phenomenon. I mean, Chuck Zukowski and Christopher O'Brien and Linda Moulton Howe, to me, they're the pioneers in that field. And like so many other people there for a while, I thought it was kind of solved, that it wasn't anything mysterious at all, that their intestines were blowing up or something. I don't know what that was. I'm like, okay, case solved, done. But no. I just recently did a conference with Chuck Zukowski, Debbie Ziegelmeyer's brother, here in Cripple Creek, Colorado. And I finally got to talk with him a little bit about things. And I think a very small percentage is the military. I think the rest of it is unknown. And one of my very favorite interviews I did in researching the ranch is one of the pioneers of that town in Elbert County. If you go to the museum, a big portion is about their family, generational pioneered this little town. So I went to Wyoming and interviewed the daughter. They have streets named after them and everything. And I asked her about the mutilations and any experiences she had, and she had quite a few. But the biggest one was right out of high school. So this would have been in 1978 or 79. Her and her husband, right out of high school, is pretty normal then to get married out of high school, moved to Ramo, which is right on the border of Elbert County. So it's really close to where the ranch was. And they had a cattle ranch of their own. Her husband was out on horseback checking the cows for calves, came across a dead calf. And the dead calf had 4 cuts in a perfect square with the top of the fur removed, but the skin was still there. So he gets on the horse, goes back to the ranch house and gets my witness, and they drive back in the pickup truck. When they got back to that calf, which took, she said, about 20 to 25 minutes, that calf had been completely mutilated, cauterized, incision, organs removed, blood drained. Only thing that was around the calf were the hoof marks of the horse. No, it was miles off the county road. It's not like she said nobody could just drive up and do this. No helicopter sounds. It was as if her husband had interrupted a mutilation in progress. They felt watched. It felt evil. It felt eerie. They were terrified. And the coolest thing about it, we're friends on Facebook. I'm still friends with her on Facebook. She said, Katie, you're not going to believe this. I found the actual photos of the calf. So I have the photos of that calf. And you can see the cauterized, you could see the organs were gone. I tend to think it's balls of orbs or lights that are coming over, kind of like, I know that a lot of the crop circles are faked. Some crop circles, talking to Dr. Simeon Hine, can be manifested. There have been groups of people that will go out in the UK and fields and meditate on symbols or circles they would like to see, and they will appear. I think just like with crop circles, that can be done with these balls of light energy or orbs. I think these mutilations are done with some sort of same technology of these balls of orbs, because that's what happened to them.
So what's your greater explanation for all of the military comings and goings in and around on the ranch in the 70s? What were they just investigating? Were they aware of it? Were they doing psyops as well to sort of mimic what they were? And what was the relationship between? Yeah, it was
all of the above. That's what I've come to believe. I think it's all of the above. I think they knew of the phenomena. They started investigating, things started happening, they started witnessing, and then they started doing black ops on top of it. I don't think it's a simple answer. One thing I did do, and this was interesting. So in the briefing document, there was a mention of two interceptors that crashed in pursuit of a UFO out there in Elbert County during this time. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, if two interceptors crashed, there has to be information about it. So I did some digging and I found the original newspaper article about it. So I got the date, time, location, and everything, and I put in a FOIA request for it. And I'm sitting at the admissions line with my youngest son who's getting his driver's license, and my cell phone rings and it's the United States Air Force on the phone. I'm like, Tyler, I think I should get this call. So 30 minutes later, he's the head of FOIA for the United States Air Force. And we had this long conversation. I wasn't going to tell him what I was really investigating or anything. I'm doing a research paper on Elbert County. And I know, all you have to do is look up my name on the internet and like he knows. He's not stupid. And he's like, I'll tell you what, Katie, if you want anything else from the United States Air Force when it comes to this topic, call me directly. Don't put in a request. And I was like, oh, interesting. Also running into Richard Doty, who, if people don't know who Richard Doty is, he was a disinformation officer for the United States Air Force. And I was curious if he knew about the ranch property. And so again, we were in Laughlin and I asked him just straight up, I'm like, hey, were you aware of this property at the time? And he said, absolutely, we were. And he said, if you want to, he's the one who told me to FOIA for this, by the way. And he said, if you want to know what was happening with the cattle mutilations, FOIA the United States Air Force's agricultural office. And then when I got the email from Bob Solis, he said the same thing, something about the agricultural office, which tells me that some of those mutilations were being done to carry out tests on the cattle, because we had the Titan missile silos out there. So maybe they're testing the groundwater, what they're eating. We had mad cow disease happening, all this other stuff. So yes, I think there's a percentage that were conducted and carried out by the military, but why they did it that way, I will never understand or know. Why they had to do it nefariously like that. Why couldn't they just, either raise their own cattle in locations and test them, or knock on the ranchers' doors and say, hey, I'll give you $500. Maybe they're on a budget and they're making a mystery out of it. I don't understand the whole reason why they would keep it secret if they were doing it like that.
My impression from what I've read is that it's possible that the military was actually just trying to do a cattle mutilation of their own to see how it was done.
Could be.
Does that they were trying to figure out and say, well, let's fly a helicopter in, let's try to mutilate a cat. How long does it take? How do we get the blood out? How do we do the incisions? And how do we pull it off and fool a farmer, basically, make him think that it was something else?
Right.
That was at least a little bit, but they're actually coming in afterwards and mimicking or attempting to mimic what the phenomenon is doing. but the phenomenon is the lead. What do you think the military's current involvement is with Skinwalker Ranch? You've seen the choppers showing up, military craft. Do you think there's some psyops going on there? I mean, what?
Yeah, I think they're in monitoring mode. I asked Richard that very question because we have articles. I mean, it's not just me making stuff up here. Like there were unmarked helicopters, and in fact, there's a great document out there. And if you go to my website, katiepaige.net, and you send me a message, if you're interested in reading this, I'll send it to you. I have it in a PDF, but it's called The Choppers and the Choppers. And it's about this whole unmarked black out helicopter phenomenon, and they were chasing and menacing people. And I asked Richard, I'm like, why would they do something like that? The military, why would the military, if they were them and the choppers, why are they menacing and chasing young? I mean, these are young kids, right? It's scaring the tar out of people. And he said, oh, it's a diversion. Like, don't look here, look over there. Like, we're doing this over here, but we want you to focus on this phenomenon over here. So this whole blacked out, these choppers flying on and off of properties at the time, this was happening a lot. I mean, even the sheriffs would see these choppers fly off his own property. Why were they there? We don't know. And according to Richard, they were a diversion of some sort to take our attention away from something else they were doing.
Like what? Like craft?
Underground tunnels, perhaps?
Not like some kind of exotic stealth bomber or something like that, or stealth fighter. You've got an Air Force base nearby, and you've got the Air Force Academy.
Yeah, and Cheyenne Mountain and NORAD right there, are they digging tunnels? Those sounds and bangs underground, the hum sounds, were they digging tunnels from New Mexico to, who knows, through Wyoming up to Montana? Who knows? I don't know. I've tried to map it out on Google Maps. Like, if I'm going to dig a tunnel,
there's all
where I go?
The stories about DIA and the tremendous amount of earth that was moved during the construction of DIA. By the way, I lived in Colorado for 20 years during that time when they were building all that stuff.
Right.
And it was such a fiasco. But yeah, the question of tunnels, and you think if the military really wants to research these sites, but they don't want to tip their hand, one way to do it would be to try and surreptitiously build stuff underground,
right,
and just not disclose it.
But why not just buy the damn ranch?
Yeah, exactly. And also, why would you then fly helicopters over it? Now, I will say there were some people on our subreddit who were saying, oh, I used to be in the military, and we would do that kind of stuff all the time. Just, like we could get away with it, and we would just do it for shits and giggles.
Just to mess with people.
Just to mess with people.
Well, darn you out there. I'm waiting for somebody. So let me get back to this really quick. So I FOIA'd for the two A7Ds, okay?
Yes.
And so I get this back. So what it was, this was at night. Two A7D interceptors were scrambled out of Buckley Air Force Base, which is now Space Force at the time. And according to, it's so interesting because, you get to the really cool, good parts, and then this is what happens. It's blacked out. But from what I can read, it was a student, according to these documents, it was a student and an instructor. They had 255 live rounds of ammunition on board. What this says is one of the causes of the crash was the instructor pilot misidentified the beacon of another aircraft, which on the tower scripts, there was something on radar. It never, in this big thick stack of documents, it never identifies what the other aircraft was. It doesn't say, it was a Cessna or this or that. It only mentions it the one time. And when the instructor misidentified the beacon light of another aircraft, he ran into the tail of the student. Both interceptors went down, both pilots ejected, both pilots survived, but both planes were interceptors are complete loss. So I find it interesting that there is mention of another aircraft in these documents, and that's what was reported in Dr. Sprinkles, that they were in pursuit of a UFO. And so I went to David Marler. David Marler lives in New Mexico. He has one of the biggest UFO. He has the original Project Blue Book, NICAP, CUFOS. It's all these historical documents. And I like going there a couple times a year to pull documents from the 70s, especially from that area. And I was going through his documents, and right in 1977, the NORAD in Canada admits to scrambling 2 interceptors in pursuit of a UFO out of Canada. So we know they were doing that at the time. So why wouldn't they do it in Elbert County? And I thought that was really cool to find that letter in that document, basically Air Force admitting to scrambling jets. And we have many reports that come in where people are watching an unidentified flying object, and then you have the jets or helicopters coming in right after it. Some reports even say that they're escorting something, whether it's our own technology that we're not aware of, or it's something else. But I do believe military, or mostly Navy, Air Force, are aware of the phenomenon and are perhaps working with the phenomenon on some level.
Wow. How do you think disclosure is going to go down? We've got some congressional hearings coming up really quick. You're part of MUFON. You've got all this information. You've got a pretty good handle on what the military has been doing over the last 4 decades at least. A lot of people are feeling like there's some big disclosure that's going to be happening, that it's going to blow by the end of the summer.
4 years. I think we're on a timeline. We're on a timeline. It's rolling out, and there's a
lot of people talking about 2026, 2027 for some big event, right? You Chris Bledsoe and all that. Yes. But we also, there's a lot of talk that we're hearing about. There's going to be a kickoff or some kind of a big disclosure this summer that's going to sort of set the stage for that in 4 years. Have you got a sense that something big is going to happen this summer to start that?
Yeah, I think it's already starting being rolled out. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Being rolled, you mean like intentionally being rolled out, or everyone's coming kicking and screaming? It seems like this is just out of control, that White House can't control it anymore. The Pentagon can't control the messaging. It's infiltrated the mass media now. We've got hearings, whistleblowers, laws potentially being passed. It doesn't seem like any single group is going to be able to shut this down like they've done for the last 40 years.
Well, I'm kind of,
who's rolling it out though? Who's behind this disclosure?
Well, I think it's interesting. Navy came out. I don't think they wanted to come out. I think it just happened that way, where they didn't want to. They're like, oh crap, here we go. Air Force has too much liability, and I'll tell you, and I'll say it on the show, and I believe this. Like, if they had a hand in anything that I experienced on the ranch, or my sister, or any of dozens upon dozens, hundreds of people, it's affected our lives in a very personal way. And if they're culpable for any of that, and I'm meaning Air Force with these Black Access projects, they have liability, and they're not going to come forward because, I was naive in thinking there was 150 Black Access projects. When I listened to that hearing, that debriefing, they said there's over 1,000 of them. So who knows what nefarious things they have done, and who has that impacted. And if it's impacted people, then they're liable for that on some level, and they'll never come forward with it until everybody's dead and gone and it's forgotten about. Even in the research, I go to the archives, they have things under lock and key for another 50, 60 years, and they will not come forward with that. So I believe from the very beginning, 2014 and on, that this has been this slow kind of rollout. And I think it's happening because they can't control us anymore. They can't control this kind of podcasting, us communicating.
They can't shut us down.
They can't shut it down. It's the cat's out of the box. There's no stopping it now. So they have to get out ahead of it the best they can. But they're all like scrambling. Like, watching those hearings was like frustrating to me. Like, that's the video they chose. They don't know their history of ufology. They can't even pause it to, I was just like going, what's going on? It's such a mess. But slowly it's coming out. And these whistleblowers, I think the waters are being tested right now for immunity. They're testing it. How much can we get away with saying? And the more people can speak and not get in trouble, the more people are going to come forward. And even people and this is why I love doing these podcasts and these shows and just talking at conferences, because it never fails that, either somebody will have a piece of the puzzle and have more information for me, and they're willing to talk because this is, a long time ago, or people will have these different ideas. I had this one woman just come up to me and she said, one of the things that were reported with my witness from Wyoming, she said the ranches where the mutilations were happening, the cattle were really calm and huddled together. And in the adjoining pastures where they weren't being mutilated, they were all freaked out and acting crazy. And so a woman came up to my table after I spoke and she said, maybe those boxes that are emitting these tones are calming the cattle or herding the cattle together like a tone or a frequency. I'm like, that's really brilliant. That might be a piece of the puzzle. Those kind of things. I think that's really important. So they can't shut us up. So
a lot of experiencers report hearing beeping noises and tones associated, not necessarily just with contact events, but at other times. It's not, right. They say it's not like tinnitus. Yeah, it's like a beep or a tone or whatever. Now you said 4 years, and I'm assuming you're somewhat thinking about Elizondo. He's kind of talked about that a little bit, but
actually I got it for
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I got that from Contact in the Desert. I was just at Contact in the Desert. I'm sitting at the couch talking to a gentleman, and they're like, hey, do you know who you were just talking to? And I'm like, no, I have no idea, because and they're like, well, that's Ray Hernandez. And, he kind of talks about this 4 years. So that's where that came from for me.
Okay.
Chris Bledsoe is saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, so many people are saying it. Like Leslie Keene has hinted at it. Lou Elizondo has hinted at it. But I was going to say, Christopher Mellon, who is very closely associated with this, is saying this is not a planned thing. Like, this is just a grassroots. People are like, they're like, we can't keep this from the public anymore. People need to know. But gosh, I got to say, the way it's come together as quickly as it has, I'm suspicious of that personally. I kind of feel like somebody's got to have, some people in positions of power have got to be kind of helping this along.
Right.
That's my feeling.
Everybody should be suspicious and everybody should be doing their own homework. Like, I love telling people, like, if somebody claims to have all the answers, run really fast, because nobody does. Also, I worry about this false threat narrative that people have been talking about for a very long time. Like, is this the next COVID? Is this the next tactic to use to control and to put fear into people? Be careful of that. In this field, we can talk about we put human motives and intentions on extraterrestrials, and that's a very hard thing to do. Even with the ranch, like, I could say these mechanical guys are the bad guys and the Nordics are the good guys. We don't know. I don't know what they were doing there. I still don't have the answers to everything that was happening there. I mean, the other thing we didn't talk about, one memory, very distinct memory, both my sister and I have. It was a spring day out on the ranch. We're flipping the Frisbee back and forth, but there was that wet, heavy springtime snow in Colorado. Well, Charles, you live there. So the sun's shining, nice day, snow on the ground, and we're flipping the Frisbee, and we look down at our feet, and there's this large snowless circle, and this dirt was dry and nothing grew there. And talk about validation, that was in the briefing document. There were 2 of those on the ranch property, and the one, they measured it, and it was 75 feet in diameter, and in the snow, there were drops of blood outside the snowless circle. So my sister and I witnessed that circle. That's how memorable it was, how strange it was. And just that feeling of being on the ranch was so strange, that to see that in writing, and there's that tone in my ear, my left ear, to see that in writing was so validating to me, to see that. But yeah.
Do you feel like Skinwalker Ranch is part of disclosure?
If anything, Skinwalker Ranch and all these, I'm just happy. I'm happy that these different locations and are talking with one another and getting this hitchhiker phenomenon and these multiple things that are happening at these properties out there. And maybe perhaps that is a piece to disclosure, tying these different phenomenon together. Because to me, that's what Skinwalker Ranch represents, and the Elbert County Ranch, and that it's this whole mystery of all the different phenomena coming together in one location. And just like in Elbert County at Skinwalker, you do have that military presence too. And so I don't know how they feel about what the military is doing, how long they've been there, but it's my understanding it's been there since the 80s, correct? The mid 80s, like 85.
The military?
The military presence at Skinwalker.
Well, Skinwalker Ranch sort of came on the map in the 90s. So it would have been in the 90s. Yeah.
Okay,
Sherman's got the ranch in like the mid 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe the military was involved from the very beginning. That's very possible. Yeah, there's definitely a military connection to all of this, it seems.
And not just high strangeness though, but a lot of UFO encounters in general they're close to military bases.
Yeah. So again, what do you think the big disclosure is going to be by the end of this summer? What do you think if we were to talk to you again in September or August?
I think by the end of the summer, we're just going to see more and more whistleblowers coming forward, more and more military men and women that not only military, but so many corporations, large corporations are contracted out and working with back engineering. Okay.
So you think they have craft?
Oh, yeah. I do.
Do you think they have bodies?
Yes.
You do?
I do. Yes,
do you think they have live bodies or footage of live bodies?
I don't think they have live bodies anymore.
Okay. Are they extraterrestrials? Because we're talking grays here.
I believe so.
Okay.
I say this for a good reason.
No, you're not a fan of the interdimensional hypothesis.
Or time travel from our future or past, or
I'm trying to remember who it was. Oh, I know. It was Trey Hudson, my good buddy from the South's Ranch, Trey Hudson. So I've done a couple. I've flown out to his undisclosed location a couple times with Trey. And we were together just recently. Where were we? In the Ozarks. And Trey and I were talking, and he had this great description of interdimensional. And and I loved it because I'm very visual. And he's like, take like a stool with 4 legs on it and make it so you can just see the legs of the stool and it kind of fades in and out, right? That's sort of like what's playing with interdimensionality. Like part of the stool can be where we can't see it and you're just seeing the tips of the legs in our reality, in our dimension. So it's kind of playing in and out of the dimensions. And I like that. And I'm like, that makes a lot of sense to me. Because they have all sorts of crazy activities and I've experienced out there too. At Trey's place down south. But I think that as these whistleblowers and these, so here's a good example. A couple of years ago, this was pre-COVID, I went to Canyon City to do a talk about the ranch. And I like to arrive early places. So I'm like an hour and a half early and I walk into this local newspaper and the guy that owns the newspaper there, it says, hey, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, you're not going to believe it, but, and so I start talking about the ranch and UFOs. And it turns out this person was a high up level of General Electric. Okay. Many, top secret clearances. He had just recently lost pretty much his wife, his son, everything, and kind of getting up there in years. And he basically, we talked that whole entire time. I'm like, I got to go do my thing, like an hour and a half. I talked to him and he basically told me, if you can conceive it, we've already done it. We're at least 40 years more advanced than what the general population even knows. Like, and it frustrates me because like, why don't we have free energy? We have it, we can do it. They just won't roll it out. And that's basically what, and he also said this. He said, why they want Nancy Pelosi's laptop? I'm like, why? And he's like, because China's been trying to acquire the other part of General Electric in that closet of all their back engineered stuff. He basically told me they've been back engineering UFOs.
And the Chinese want it.
For a long time. Yeah, and the Chinese want it.
So back to extraterrestrials.
Breaking news.
I mean, that's profound, but extraterrestrials.
Yeah. So no, I believe that. And the reason I believe the body, so it's been my other passion. I love researching the ranch. It's very personal to me. But a MUFON case came across, 3.5 years ago. It's since been kind of signed over to me by the witnesses. But long story short, there was a General Brigadier Arthur Exxon. There was rumored that one of the Roswell bodies made it to a mortuary outfit in Denver. And I've been investigating that case now for several years. It involves Eisenhower's, Mamie, Fitzsimmons, Lowry, a federal judge appointed by Nixon. And I believe that one of the ET bodies, one of the 3 of them went to Texas. One of the ones that went to Texas went to Fitzsimmons, I believe. And I have interviewed a couple times now. He has since passed, but the mortician that he pulled his caper, this body sat in a mortuary outfit in Denver, really close to Lowry Fitzsimmons. The mortuary is no longer there. The body was finally moved, but there was a hold on it by a federally appointed judge who, by the way, when I went to the archives to investigate him, was a 33rd degree Mason, was the infectious disease specialist and the crash retrieval specialist. And the owner of the mortuary where that body sat for decades, where they stored the chairs in the mortuary, was owned by, he lived 3 doors down from Mamie Eisenhower. So there's all these connections to this case that I've been working and pulling documents for. I believe I know where they moved that little body to. I believe Eisenhower protected that body. And this is a big story that I'll be rolling out in the next year or two as I get more documents, because it's such a big story that you have to have documents to back it up. But so far, all those puzzle pieces are coming together and it all makes logical sense to me. So yes, I believe, and I just watched the other day a theory that the Roswell crash was actually Japanese spy balloons or something, and those were little Japanese bodies, but I don't believe that to be true. I think they were extraterrestrial bodies.
So do you believe these extraterrestrials came physically from another like star system, right? Another solar system close by, or another galaxy?
That's a good
Beta
question.
Reticuli or Sirius, or, there's all these.
Or again, like when we're saying extraterrestrial, but I think what Dean's really asking is, do you genuinely think that these beings are from like literally another planet, or that they might be something like interdimensional or something more complicated than just ETs? Am I understanding right?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. And that's the one, I mean, you talk to skeptics and debunkers, they're like, yeah, I believe that there's life out there in the universe. It's so vast. How can there not? But how are they traveling here, right? What is the propulsion? What is their means of getting to Earth? And I agree with that. I'm like, maybe they're living under our oceans and they're here already. Maybe they're in Antarctica and they're just coming up and and then that's the other argument. Why would they travel light years and get to Roswell, New Mexico, and they can't fly it anymore?
And crash.
Like, they're drunken alien teenagers, and then you hear the lightning storm. I mean, there's all these theories, and I hear them all, and I consider them all. I don't know. Are they flying from Zeta Reticuli, or are they coming from under our oceans? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Do you think? What do you think about the big disclosure in 4 years? What is that? Is that the eschaton? Is that the end of the world? Is it the new world? Is it free energy for everybody? It's a big event, but what is it?
I don't know. It's a scary thought.
I mean, you're involved with remote viewing groups, and I know this is a topic that has been explored quite a bit. People like Stephen Schwartz, for example. I mean, is it just too controversial to really talk about, or do you think it's going to be something positive, something negative?
I think that I think I could say this safely. I think it's going to be big change. And I just mean on a global scale. And I'm talking the way the countries interact with one another, maybe monetarily. I don't know, I joke about it, but I'm kind of not joking. I feel like, and I have kids and they're all grown. They're not kids anymore, but they're always my kids. So I refer to them as my kids. But it's like, have at least 3 months food and water. I mean, I don't mean to sound negative or, I'm not like a crazy prepper person or anything, but have the minimum, start being prepared to live off the grid if you need to. If our computers shut down, if our phones shut down, that could happen, and just be prepared for that. So I don't think it's like end of the world and, mass destruction or anything, but I think it's a time of big change on some level.
And it's phenomenon related.
I believe so. I mean, the rumors I'm hearing, like, they can't keep the lid on this anymore. Whatever deals were made, like, this is, and not just like anybody else that's hearing these things, like, time's ticking. They made certain deals and they know it's coming to where it's going to be, where basically ET is going to be coming out, and like, here we are.
So now when you say they made deals, you mean that the phenomenon or the aliens or the visitors, whatever you want to call them, have made deals with parts of the government?
And I don't only think the United States, I think other governments as well. That's my understanding.
Do you think we're the only country to have free energy, or do you think the Russians and Chinese are sitting on it too? Maybe even the French and British?
Probably sitting on it too. Yeah. I mean, it's
because the aliens are constraining
this in power, right? It's this in power. I mean,
but who's holding the lid on it? Are the aliens saying, hey, if you release this now, you're dead?
I think we're holding the lid on it. I think the powers that be want control and money and power.
Don't you think the aliens would say, hey, you guys have got to let this, we gave this to you guys 50 years ago. What do you got to roll this out?
Yeah, I think that's coming. I do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you talked to this gentleman from GE, did he specifically say we have free energy, or did he just kind of hint at it?
He kind of hinted at it. Like, I need to go interview him again. I need to do that before the end of the summer. I'll let you know. But he basically said, if you can conceive it, we have it. And I've heard this from other people as well. I mean, you know, Project Looking Glass. I mean, we've time traveled and you know, all that kind of good stuff. So I think we meaning, you know, secret access projects have delved into all these things. I think it started after World War II.
I think it started during World War II, potentially.
World War II.
I mean, the Nazis were heavily investigating the occult. I don't want to tie this all back into the Nazis. Right. but to say the occult was something that was being investigated. And the occult is connected to the occult, simply meaning hidden. I'm not talking about demons and Satan and all that stuff. It's just hidden things. Like, we know the government was investigating remote viewing, for example, and still utilizing it. I am wondering how many of these things they've done at Skinwalker Ranch that they're not talking about, you know?
Yeah,
like,
agreed.
if they had remote viewers on site, have they, not that they would need to, but, you know, have they? If they had,
I'm sure,
psychics, you know, all of that kind of stuff.
Well, I found out, speaking of psychics, there was a psychic, a really well-known psychic by, her name was Clarissa Bernhardt. In Dr. Sprinkle's files, Clarissa Bernhardt was on the ranch property. And I'm like, what? She was one of the only psychics to accurately predict an earthquake by time, date, location, everything by the minute or something like that. She was on the ranch property out there investigating. They were investigating, and they had Clarissa out there. So there's letters from her. And so I tracked her down and did a phone interview with her years ago. And she's in Canada now. And I'm like, so do you remember you were out there with John Durr, PhD, and Leo Sprinkle, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, yeah. She goes, and we were talking about children there. And I recall that the activity got really high when the young girl was out there.
That was you.
That was me. She goes, I can't believe I'm talking to the young girl that was out there, because the activity would increase when the young girl was out there, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, so I have that recording I share when I go present. But the whole thing is mind blowing. But when it comes to hidden knowledge and all these different elements, I think they're all critically important to the phenomenon itself. Again, I believe we are co-creators of the phenomenon itself on many different levels: ghosts, UFOs, Sasquatch, all of it. And so when I say I plug in and unplug, anybody can do this. Anybody has the ability to work with those gifts and to tap into other realms. And so I believe that all plays a role in it. And as far as disclosure in the Black Access projects and the military, they've known about this for decades. They've been playing with it for decades. They've tried to weaponize it, use it to their advantage, and they try to keep it secret, and they can't keep it secret anymore. I think as people get older, you have these projects going on. And when did they start? In the early 60s, or the Black Access projects? Early 60s, did these projects start? Do you guys know?
I think they go back before we even know, honestly. Okay. I think we knew more about them in the 60s, but they formed the CIA right after World War II, right?
Okay. Right.
So the CIA has been around since the late 40s.
And the government was doing EVP work in the 50s with, was it Echo, I think?
Mm-hmm. So you got to think, all these people are getting elderly, right? 60s, 70s. And they have morals and conscience, and they're like, and deathbed confessions. And they're like, look, and they're going to spill what they know. And that's what's going to happen. That's how it's going to look, in my opinion. That's what we're going to see. More whistleblowers, more people coming forward.
Katie, are there things, I'm assuming you do have a BS detector, right? You can call bullshit on things.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you see that are out there, people talking about that you just go, no, that's bullshit?
Oh, I hate to do this because I get myself in trouble when I talk about.
Can you give me the top three things that are just total bullshit?
It's kind of funny coming from me that experienced so many weird things like disappearing boxes. Like, I believe in disappearing boxes, but not fairies. So, but that being said, I've been on some ghost hunts with my friends, and they're like, okay, so we see these, they call them fairy lights. And I'm like, there's no such thing as fairies, but there are these mysterious little energy, I guess you could call them fairy lights. They're just balls of light that appear. I've seen it at Trey Hudson's place, seen it here. So when it comes to fairies and things like that, I'm like, I don't know, but my mind has been expanded so much just recently, like with Sasquatch, Bigfoot, cryptids, these birds, Hat Man, Dog Man, that I believe all of it now. Like, my mind has been opened to everybody's individual experience. That why can't fairies exist, and why can't that, like, now I'm just like, all right, I give up. Like, it all potentially can be out there.
But how do you detect, there are people out there that are, whether they're trying to make stuff up, or how do you discern? Where's your discernment then, Katie? If you're open to everything.
Yeah. Well, no, my discernment is, so we do have hoaxes. We have hoax keystroke. We have a hoax events. People like to hoax. People like to get attention. So you have to look at people's motives for telling. Like, if somebody appears emotionally stable, we do have, unfortunately, there's mental illness. And there's, where my BS detector goes off a lot is when people have absolute truths, or they have absolute knowings of things, or they'll come up to me and say, look, I have such and such number of children from such and such different planets, it gets a little off for me. And it's not that I'm judging them poorly or anything. I worry about their mental health or their stability, or some people will put false names, addresses, phone numbers, false information. They're trying to make a buck. They're trying to tell a story. So all those things you have to look for, obviously. You look for people that are grounded. And for me, a telltale sign is, you can tell when somebody has a genuine experience and is seeking answers, because they kind of go through what we naturally go through. Like, okay, it's not a bird, it's not a bug, it's not a plane. They go through what it could be. And then they're left with, and then I have no idea what just happened to me. And you can tell the difference between somebody who's just making up a story and somebody who's not. And then there's just the logical things you look for too. People will often ask me what I think about, and I haven't done a ton of research on it. Like the thing that just happened in Las Vegas with the ET, seems more like a made up story to me from the little bit I've seen on it. I haven't dug deep into it, but
What about what happened down in Brazil?
Oh, that story, I believe.
Okay.
Many witnesses to that.
Okay.
Now, which one are you talking about? Because there've been multiple. Do you mean Mage? Do you mean
the being that was seen by the three girls?
Yeah.
James Fox just did the films. Yeah. Virginia. Mm-hmm.
What about Whitley Strieber? Okay. Bob Lazar.
I know.
What about Bob Lazar?
Oh my gosh! You're putting me on the spot now.
Well, you've got so much knowledge. You've talked to more people than I can even imagine. Again, you're sort of the hub of all of this phenomenon. You grew up on the sister to Skinwalker Ranch. You obviously have a position on Bob Lazar, or at least an opinion.
Yeah. My position on Bob Lazar actually has kind of ebbed and flowed. So I was like really a proponent, and then kind of was like, maybe not, and then maybe. So I kind of do this, but right now where I stand, I believe in Bob Lazar. So that there has been other charlatans that take advantage and want people's money to call in UFOs and things like that. I have trouble with that. When people charge you money to try and call in UFOs, don't pay money.
Mr. Greer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
I have trouble with that. Like, you don't need to pay money to do that. You can do it on your own. Yeah. That's where I struggle.
What do you think of the pseudo skeptics? Because they're just cranking up the rhetoric, aren't they?
Like it's all BS.
Yeah, like big time, like really harassing and intimidating people and mocking people. It's getting a little, I don't want to say cruel or mean.
I stay away from all that. I kind of keep my head down in my research, and I, as an experiencer, somebody who's experienced all this, even though part of me still questions how much is military, how much is actual phenomenon, I still battle that. And that's why I've come to the conclusion it's both. I don't think it's a simple answer. I think both things are happening, and that's why it's so confusing. But for those hardcore, I understand where they're coming from as being skeptical at times on certain things. So I understand their position, but I also understand that everybody has unique individual life experiences, and you can't ridicule people. Like, people's experiences are their experiences. It's just like with the psychics, right? I believe that people have the gift to be able to channel into psychic and to give readings and to talk to loved ones. And there's legitimate people that have the gift to do that. And then there's charlatans that take your money and can't do it at all. It's that same thing. Both exist. So how do you weed that out and say, how can you pick out and pick on everybody? Like, you're making it all up, but you aren't. Like, it's that same deal. Like, you just have to go by your own gut and what you know to be true. That's all anybody can do, and ignore the naysayers.
So as the lead of MUFON in Colorado, how do you deal with pseudo skeptics that get in your face? Do you have that? Do you have people that get in your face and say, this is all BS? What are you doing? You're wasting your time.
No, not often. No, really? Very, 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 very rarely. In fact, it's really interesting. Even just people coming, like I had the Starlink people up, or anybody who comes in does any, oh, okay. And I would say 8 out of 10 people have their own unique experiences, whether it's with Sasquatch, UFOs, paranormal. Most people have had experience with the unknown. That's what I've
The unknown in general, something unknown.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So many people.
Do you think there's a connection between life after death and the phenomenon? Some people say that they see deceased relatives on the craft with the grays. Does that even make sense to you, or are you open to that?
I don't know. I've heard that before. I really haven't given that all that much thought. Life after death. Yeah, I believe in life after death. I even believe in reincarnation for a very personal reason. But so why not? I guess, I don't know. Maybe if you travel in soul groups, maybe that could happen. I don't know. I don't know.
I know that some of the skeptics are probably going to watch at least some of our show.
Yeah.
And I want to note that I was one of those people who didn't really believe in any of this stuff, like was open to it, but the evidence, as far as I was concerned, was not there. James Randi, he had his $1 million challenge and nobody ever won it, and blah, 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 until I started having my own experiences and dug into it. Found out that not only was all of the research there and parapsychology and everything else, and had been, piling up for decades, but that so many of the supposed skeptics, like the rational minded people like James Randi, were kind of frauds. Randy's $1 million challenge, you couldn't win it. They would change the rules on people. They would make them, reapply over and over again. And, he would just eventually make it to the point where they couldn't do it, or they'd back out. Then he'd be like, see, nobody can win it.
Right. And I've read a lot of the letters from like class and stuff, the debunkers back in the day that wrote to Dr. Sprinkle, and reading their correspondence back and forth. Dr. Sprinkle kept all his things. And I think they kind of just take a stance. And I think my new response to any skeptics is now going to be, wait 4 years and then come back and talk to me. That's what I'm going to say.
Won't the writing be on the wall sooner than that?
Yeah, I think it's starting to. I mean, even just, in the last few years where I was more hush hush about what I was researching and what I was doing, now you can go almost anywhere and feel more confident saying, hey, yeah, so, I investigate UFOs or UAPs, and people are like, oh, really? Wow, that's an incredible, how do I get that job? And I'm like, first of all, you don't get paid. It's not a real job. So that's the first myth. I actually get emails quite often. How do I get a job doing what you're doing.
Oh,
this is,
so you get the grifter accusation. You're just in this for the money. When in reality,
Zero
there is
money.
no money.
There
There's
is
no
no
money.
money.
in this.
I hear that all the time. People are like, "Oh, they're a grifter." I'm like, I don't think
I
anyone.
wish.
Maybe Linda Moulton Howe, but she put in the legwork for
Right.
so many years. I don't, her current views are. I don't know what her BS detector. I'm not sure exactly how that's calibrated at this point because I think she was just exposed to so much that kind of like you said, you kind of eventually. And I'm in the same place. I'm like, whatever at this point. Like, there's no way. Like, I'm just like, reality is just kind of blurry at the edges. Is the way it feels.
That's where you get to at a point. And speaking of Linda Moulton Howe, I was so honored to finally meet her. And for me, at Contact in the Desert, I got to speak with her one-on-one for a few hours, a couple times. And for me, that came full circle since she started at the ranch. And then I finally got to meet with her and talk with her and talk about how the BS detector. So here's a good example. And I'm not going to name any names or anything like that. I'm just going to paint a little picture. We were sitting outside, having a nice lunch on the patio, and Linda gets approached all the time. And she hears everything, I'm sure, under the sun. And this person comes and shares really a mind-blowing lifetime of experiences where it kind of started like this and started going like kind of, and I'm thinking in my mind, is this person mentally stable and all the stuff? And Linda's patiently listening, and she very respectfully says what I was thinking. And she said to the person, how do you handle people who think you're full of beep? Just like, way to go, Linda. and the person was very, had answers like, well, A, B, C. And it was really interesting that she has heard so much that she has no qualms in just saying what she's thinking. And I really respect that in her. And I think she's been such a strong voice for women in the field. She's been at it for decades, and she is still just in there fighting the good fight and trying to do the best she can. And, she hears so much that, like you were saying, Charles, you get to a point where it's just like everything blurs at some point, and it's hard to stay grounded sometimes. And that's why I try to keep feet in both worlds, to balance that out.
And I know she does too. I didn't want to give the impression that I'm bad mouthing. No. It's just, she's been in it long enough. She's gotten to the point where it's just kind of like whatever she hears, she's like, that could very well be. Like, I'm willing to accept that.
Right. Yeah. I see how that can happen. Yeah. But I still don't believe in fairies.
Okay. That's the one
Give
thing.
It 4 years. Give it 4 years.
What about hybridization?
I'm going to get email.
You are going to get email.
I know.
Well, what about the hybridization?
Oh, goodness.
Yes.
Oh. Well, put it this way. So here is my logical. I try to be logical. So the first question, do you believe in extraterrestrial in the universe? Most people will say yes. Can they travel to Earth? If you say yes to that, I say that's 50-50. If you say yes to that, ETs made it to Earth, would they abduct? I think that's an obvious yes. I think we would, right? To learn about the species. If they're abducting, would they start manipulating with our genetics and our DNA? Chances are yes. So yes, I believe in if ET has come, if they've, and I believe they've done this for thousands of years, go back to ancient alien theory, they've probably messed with their DNA. Yes. Yes, I'm a yes on that.
Why? Purpose.
Why? Well, through other experiencers, and something that came out through my hypnosis with Dr. Sprinkle was that there are some races of ETs out there that have become so mechanical and streamlined, like well-oiled machines, that they've lost their individuality and their uniqueness and their range of motion, and that humans are a very bipolar species where we can be really happy one minute and then losing our temper the next minute. We're very creative, we're artistic, we're musical, we're poets, we're writers, and they want to get that back into their beings on their planets.
So they want to be more like us.
Some aspects of us, yes.
What about these blue-eyed Nordics? Are they sort of at the top of the pyramid and don't need us in that way?
Well, I've heard, I've just had, I do a little show on KGRA called MUFON What's Up. So we have guest speakers on. We had a wonderful guest on, Debbie Solaris. And she's a very grounded person with a very, very well-established background. I respect her a lot, and she has access to the Akashic records and kind of the history of different races and species on our planet. And I find her to be quite credible. Just looking at the little bit I've known and read about her, there's different species like the Palladians, the Arcturians, there are all these different ones, and there's certain light beings that have that are well intended for humans, are kind of fighting for us. And then there's those that are not, where you hear the typical standard, the Dracos, the reptilians, But she's also very clear not to put them all into boxes either. Just because you're a Draco or a reptilian, you're not all bad, you're not all good. So it's this whole thing. So there's those that claim to have knowledge about all that. I'm not one of those people. I just know what I hear and what I've read and what I've researched. And on the ranch where you have the Nordics and those Tubi guys, and they're in conflict, maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I don't know.
Do you believe that these beings genuinely have evolved like this? Like humanoids, that we've got insect beings, we've got lizard beings, we've got, these Nordics? Or do you think that is a psychological projection that they're giving us because it's something that makes sense to us? Like they tell us they're from Pleiades, they're from Zeta Reticuli. The universe is filled with countless galaxies, but they just happen to be from ones that are well known in our culture. It seems a little unlikely.
Right. I agree.
Ones we can see from here, right? So I kind of feel like maybe these things, that is what people are experiencing, but that's not the true nature of what these things are. That's for our benefit.
And even like the paranormal rangers, John and Stan and their experiences they've had, they've talked to witnesses where they have like extraterrestrials possibly cloak or turn into big rabbits or turn into, this or that to protect us from being so frightened from them. Like if we got to see what they really look like, maybe we wouldn't survive, have heart attacks and die. I don't know. So I've heard that happens, that we project or they project to protect our minds.
I wonder if there's not like one thing behind it all, and all of these supposed aliens are some kind of, they're like puppets, or they're, what I'm saying, but there's actually just some kind of force behind it. I wonder that, but well,
interesting. Where was it? Was it in Irvine when Lou Elizondo first spoke to MUFON, and he was quoted in saying, in a year from now, we're going to have a fundamentally different conversation. And I remember thinking right in that moment that the disclosure that they were talking, or he was talking about, or the fundamentally different conversation that he was talking about, to me, intuitively, what was coming to me was, it wasn't the disclosure of extraterrestrials or aliens or UFOs being real. To me, it was the true nature of reality itself. And we can get really deep into that. But I believe everything we're talking about, and I mean all of it, Sasquatch, paranormal, Bigfoot, UFOs, all that, it's comparable to what reality is. And Elon Musk, are we in a base reality? Is this all a video game? Is this our creation? Are we projecting all this? To me, that's what the big disclosure is. The power that we each individually have and how we can manifest our own destinies and our realities.
And who we really are, right? And our real potential.
Yeah. That's what
I like that. I like that a lot.
I think I saw a picture of you with Amy Bruni. Is that correct? From Kindred Spirits.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
Which, by the way, I really enjoy that show. But they explored in some of the episodes, for people who don't know the show, it's kind of a classic ghost hunting show, but they've explored in there in a few episodes the idea that some of these things are being consciously manifested.
I believe it.
That they were created by paranormal researchers going on site and expecting to see a specific thing because there was some myth, and then they communicate with it. And then in one of the episodes, they wrote a whole backstory for this thing, and they did another EVP session, and they were asking it questions, and it was giving them the details that they had created. Now, who knows what the truth behind that was, but people experience these types of things. It's like, I know people who aren't familiar with it can watch that and go, that's ridiculous. This is not uncommon. When you get into the paranormal, this is more normal.
Right. I 100% believe that. And I think in a sense, it's been demonstrated over and over in different areas, even with the crop circles, like I talked about earlier, people really manifesting hard on a certain thing. And then there it is. I mean, how does that happen? It's documented. I mean, these things are documented. This is stuff science can get behind. We just need more people willing to do it. So I think that's a big answer.
How do you do science on something that you're potentially manifesting? Like at Skinwalker Ranch, are they creating this phenomenon by expecting it to be there? Like, was that
co-creating it
there? Yeah, was that portal there before Travis started shooting rockets at it?
We're gonna poke the beehive. I think it's like I look at it like a stew pot, and you need all the right ingredients. And I think different people, and again, this is why it's important everybody communicates, because you get the different pieces you need. So you need high magnetism. I think you need water. You need certain tones and frequency. You need certain state of minds. You need these different elements to come together, and then have the expectation. And then oftentimes something will occur. Now you can't predict what will occur, but something will occur. Surprise!
That you potentially co-created. It didn't come out on it. You can sort of see that playing out. Now that we've got 4 seasons of Skinwalker Ranch, if you go back to that first season, those first few episodes, and you see how they evolve, it does seem like there's some kind of a co-creation going on.
Yeah. And it only takes 1 or 2 skeptics in the group to ruin it for everybody else.
That's the cheap goat effect in parapsychology, right? So and the research it really supports this, that the strong disbelievers not only don't experience things, but sometimes can make other people not experience these things.
Right. Yes.
And that's borne out by like peer-reviewed, replicated research. If people want to look it up, sheep goat effect, go investigate it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And I meet so many people, that I have a really good friend who would just love to see something, why can't I see something? Why can't I see something? Why can't I see something? And I try to explain it's because you're too much in your head. There's too factual, but you're too science. You gotta, like, you have to practice some certain things like meditation, quieting the mind. All those things are important to do that. And it just, I don't know why some people can experience and other people can't. I don't know what that is, but I definitely see it, and it's frustrating for those who want to have an experience and can't.
Well, this is something Gary Nolan seems to be investigating, right? Where he's been studying the brains of experiencers. You were talking about this. Mm-hmm. Travis was talking about it. Mm-hmm. Studying the brains of experiencers and finding some things that correlate in the caudate putamen, I guess, with higher connections.
Right.
And this has to do with intuition and, senses. And that maybe people who've got because they don't think that this comes about from having the experience. They think this is what enables these types of experiences. Awesome. Is you're kind of tapped into something around it. It's kind of like people who they can see more colors, they're trichromats or whatever. People who can taste more things, super tasters.
Right. And more kids, and I'm having this weird thing again happen, but more and more kids are coming in, that are on the autism spectrum. My youngest son was on that pervasive development disorder spectrum, and he would, when he was little, he didn't speak for 3 years. He would just click, and we were learning signs with him. When he was able to start talking, he's all caught up now and is actually going for aviation mechanics. So he's an amazing young man. But he would call out people by color. And I'd be like, Tyler, you know, he would see people's auras around them. And more kids are coming in that are highly sensitive like that. And if you've noticed, there's a lot more anxiety disorders, you know, those kind of things. And I think it's because children and they're getting more and more sensitive to these extra sensory abilities. I do see that.
I wonder how much that's tied in with this disclosure. I don't know, again, the chicken egg thing, but
yeah,
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad this is something we're talking about. But we also need to appreciate that there are people in our audience that have never had an experience. And a lot of this stuff is just like, whew, and some of it is scary. Yeah. And they don't know how to ground themselves because they kind of know something inside tells them a lot of this is true. Mm-hmm. And they, you know, I'm talking, you know what I'm saying? But they haven't had an experience.
Right.
So, and they're like, whoa, what advice would you give to them?
I think all of us on some level or another have an experience of some type, whether it's a dream, a lucid dream, a nightmare, a sound in the house, anything like that. And number one, protect yourself, positive thoughts, white light, ground yourself, those kind of things. And number two, and I'm guilty at not doing this all the time, but anytime you do have something unusual that you can't necessarily explain, write it down, journal it, write down a date and a time, write down what happened, because our memories forget things all the time. Like, for example, that experience I had with the blue ball of light when I started investigating this stuff again in 2013. I'm glad I journaled about it because I found it. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that happened. But what had happened was my kids at the time, my boys, I have 4 boys and a girl, they were playing with Legos all the time. And I had a red bucket of Legos in my bedroom, and that bucket fell over and woke me up out of my sleep. And when I woke up, that basketball blue orb was in the corner of my room. And the auto light was going on and off at the house behind. And so my now ex-husband, I was, you know, Steve, wake up. And he wakes up and I'm like, look. And because it sat in the corner for a while, and he saw it too. So he saw the blue orb. And as his eyes were kind of adjusting, it just went, whoom. It did that. It just went like that. And it was gone. And I was doing what a good witness would do. I'm looking at the light on the smoke detector in the bedroom and the cable box where the TV, because we have our TV. I'm like looking, and the auto light was going on and off. It was bizarre. So it wasn't just the orb. It was the Lego bucket falling over, the light behind the house, and the orb. So it's important to journal these things. And for those, you know, just be careful what you wish for and what you ask for, because you're opening doors that you might not know where they go or who's behind them. So just be careful, you know.
I'm going to say, you know, that's something on the Experiencer subreddit, because we have a lot of people on there who aren't experiencers, but they're curious about it. Mm-hmm. And they say, you know, I'm interested in trying CE5 or something like that. Do you have any advice? And I'm always like, my biggest piece of advice is just be aware you don't know what we're dealing with.
Yeah, right.
And it's possible to have a negative experience, and you have to be just willing to participate in that, because it can happen.
Right. And my other advice for CE5 kind of things, I have more experiences if when I communicate with whatever, I do it in my head. Like, I don't say things out loud. Like, I don't go outside of my patio out here and go, hey, show me a sign that you're here and say hi. Like, I say it in my head, and then I'll get a response more often than if I verbally do it out loud, whatever that's worth.
What is that response? What's the response you get?
I get flashes, just bright, boom. I'll be like, oh,
lighting
thanks.
up a whole area, or
boom. It happened the other night with my fiance. I'm like, I really need you to witness that I could do this. And people say, and then boom. So repeated, like same. And then it'll go here, and then it'll go up, and then it'll go down, and then it'll, you know, it's not a satellite. I've seen, you know, it's just a hello.
So this is up in the sky, you mean?
Oh yeah, way up there.
Okay.
How did he react when he saw it?
He was like, you could do it. Yeah. So, yeah. So now I got to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. So, but I do it all the time. As a matter of fact, so often I've just, like you said, I expect it now. I'm like, give me the hello, boom. Thanks. That's it. And you call me a liar all you want, but there it is. So.
Wow. There was a question I wanted to ask you when you brought up Linda, right? And you mentioned that she was sort of a hero for you to some degree because she's female. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, she's a pioneer in the field.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So what's it like to be a woman in this, first of all, in MUFON, and then also in the larger, group here? What's it like to be a woman?
We have our own unique set of challenges.
That's why I ask.
Yeah. No, we do. And it's a balance. Like, it's important to stay grounded and do your hard work and your research and be truthful and honest and do what you can. But we also deal with those creepers out there. And that's something that unfortunately we deal with. And that's it. I don't know. I know there's a lot of women in the field that I respect greatly. And there's those that have worked really hard and then deal with some things and they disappear. And I understand why, because you're faced with some not so nice advances and things like that. So
you experience some harassment.
Yeah, a little bit of harassment.
Do you feel like you get as much respect as your male peers?
I hope so.
Okay,
I hope
good.
so. I hope so. I mean, I do feel like we have to fight the good fight and, stay in there, but it is what it is. And that's true with a lot of different things. So
what do you think about the fact that the ranch team is all men? Other than the caretaker, there's the caretakers that live on the ranch, but you get a lot of testosterone on the program, don't you? Is that something that you notice as a woman? Do you notice that?
Oh, well, of course.
Yeah.
Of course I do. And I think that it would be nice, and I'm not speaking for myself or anything like that, but I think a different perspective, a different energy might bring some unexpected things to the location and the experiences themselves. So
do you think that the phenomenon reacts differently to male and female at all, or?
I think it's possible, not necessarily different, but I think women in general can be a little more intuitive than male counterparts, but that's not to say males can either. There's so many male great intuitives and psychics and males that have the gift as well. So I don't think it's based on gender per se, but it would be nice to have a better balance of that. So
represent the other half of humanity, right?
Yeah,
at least at a minimum, right? And then get that other
right.
intuitive perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Have you ever sensed male or female or a gender of any kind from the phenomenon itself? Like when you heard this voice, this mechanical voice,
male.
Did it sound like a male voice or a female voice?
Male, definitely male.
So it was a distinct male voice.
Definitely male.
Have you ever felt like a female entity behind the phenomena?
That's a really good, interesting question. I've never been asked that before. And I would say no, always male.
So you think this phenomenon is exclusively male?
I don't think it's exclusively male, but in my experiences, the things have been like the shadow beings, I sense male. I don't sense female, but I've had people say that they're female entities or ETs there. I just don't personally have that experience.
Not with the Sasquatch, not with
no
the orb. Did the orb sense? Did it seem to have?
That didn't have. You know what that felt like to me? It felt like that felt like being monitored.
Like
it
a
felt
camera.
It felt like a camera,
Probe.
Not male, like a probe. That was not male nor female. It wasn't an entity itself. That was some sort of monitoring something.
So
that's what
at
it
times
felt like to me.
So at times there's a non-human entity intelligence involved directly there, like a presence, like a Sasquatch, right? And then there's these devices.
I feel like whatever those balls of light are.
And the boxes.
Yeah, those are like like either communication devices or monitoring devices, or like an eye, like watching, something like that. That's what and that's what it feels like to me. I have no idea what they are. And it sounds crazy to me. Like if I'm one of your listeners and I'm listening to this, I'm like, that sounds nuts to have this orb, but it was there and I don't know what it was. And interestingly, when I read about it too, that was validating. In Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, they talk about these blue orbs, and they said, and I might misquote here, and I hope that I don't, but something along the line of, don't assume these are extraterrestrial in nature. Meaning that possibly we have a technology that can do this. That's how I took it when I read that. You
mean like someone in the military actually can fly orbs?
Something. That's how I took it. And that's what it said in there. I'm like, oh, interesting. Mm-hmm.
You know, if they do actually have free energy, then who knows what they can actually do? You know, if they've got a nuclear power plant in their pocket, right?
Yeah, I don't know. So,
wow.
I don't know.
Wow.
You know, mind control stuff too. I wonder about that. How much, you know, the tones, the frequencies, what is that all about? Is that some sort of control by tone? I mean, they used tones and sounds as weapons, like where they were experimenting with that in World War II, sound weapons. So
I think they even have some of that technology today.
Right. Scary stuff.
Where they create sounds that you can't even hear at a distance, and suddenly you get really nervous.
Right. Or just in our own music, the resonance in the music is they changed it to bring more anxiety and fear and aggression.
Oh, you mean popular music?
Yeah. Yeah. The tones, if you research that, you can research that. Look it up on the internet. The different frequencies. I kind of went off on that rail for a while.
No, that's okay. Listen, no, the good thing is, so we've been at this for like 2.5 hours. And what's cool about our podcast is the skeptics, and we burned all of them off. The only thing we've got left is that core audience that really loves what you're saying and really wants to hear, you know, the dilly deep stuff at this point. Is there any, can we take this to the next level real quick? Is there anything else you feel like you wanted to share to an audience that?
Yeah, you know, I mean, what I'd really love to share is just when it going full circle back to the ranch and, you know, Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, I had such an amazing week with that whole experience was fantastic for me. And since it was so personal for me, the first time being back since I was a little girl, how supportive everybody was, how genuine everybody was. Like, we're not going to let you meet this person or that person until the cameras are rolling. And most shocking to me, because my big question was like, I was so afraid, like, we're going to go there and nothing's going to happen. This was all these decades ago. And to have all these different things the hum sound at the cistern after all these years, and it lasted a long time. The interaction with the house and the equipment, another, you know, the light that flew over and stopped and just boom out, the footprints in all of it, all the stuff, even the scary thing on all that. I was just floored that what I took away from that week of filming was whatever was there still seemed intelligent. It seemed to knows me or knew I was back. And I know that sounds like I'm not trying to be arrogant in any kind of way, but that's what happened. And I left there going, holy crap. It's still happening. And it you know, like, and I even think the people who live there now was like shocked by it. Like the looks on their faces were like, what is this? You know? And so whatever it is that that I've been researching all this time, it's very much real and it's intelligent. And I don't know what it is, who it is, why it is, what it wants, if I'm manifesting, if I'm not, but it is what it is, and it keeps me going, and it keeps me looking for answers. Honestly, you know, I want the proof like everybody else. You know, I want to be able to document and say, this is the magic formula. This is how we have to do it, you know, and that's what keeps me going, I guess. and helping others that have experiences too, because really you have to have validation and you need somebody to talk to, because if you internalize it and people just think I mean, I can't tell you how many times when I was little and I was shut down, like, oh, it's your overactive imagination, it's the boogeyman, it's the this and the that. And you learn very quickly to shut up and remain quiet. And when that happens, then, you start the depression and all that stuff. So it's important to be able to talk to people about what you're experiencing and try to find answers for them. So that's why, talking to others and doing the MUFON work is so important too. So people have an outlet.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. We have the Experiencers subreddit, which I co-moderate, and one of the rules we have on there, which was controversial but has worked really well, is that there's no debunking allowed. People can just share whatever they want. Nobody can come along and ask for proof. They can't, say, did you consider maybe it was something prosaic or whatever? It's just people can share safely, and that's been working really well.
Right. No, that's really important. And for the naysayers out there, I mean, this is I have so much research and so much, like, I'll be happy to talk to any of you. I'll talk to you guys, and it was so funny because even I'm not going to name a name, but somebody on the show is kind of a debunker, non-believer. And I looked at it as like, okay, well, we'll wait for the end of the week and then talk to me. So I'd be really interested to talk to the person after they filmed all those episodes and see if they've changed their mind. I'll have to do that. Hey, by the way, are you still a disbeliever?
By the way, did you see any weird stuff behind the scenes, like batteries or cameras? That kind, they talk a lot about how they actually do have problems filming things, right?
Yeah, that's.
Did you see that too? Was there that kind of stuff going on?
Yes, and yes. And that's why I was so amazed that, like, when I watched I was actually in Virginia when it came out, so I was lucky. I was somewhere I could actually watch it, and so we were watching it, and I was like, when it was over, I was like, I can't believe A, B, C, D, E, F, G didn't make the show. Like, there was so much that happened that they didn't even put in the show that I was like really kind of like shocked that they didn't add some of this stuff. And so, and it also should make your viewers happy that they really do try and keep it scientific. They don't like to go off in the woo, even though a bunch of woo happened. They don't like to go there. So you're not seeing so much that is happening.
So in the moment when the woo is happening, are they just like trying to ignore it, or are they acknowledging it and saying, would you turn the cameras off? Or...
Yeah, they're like, oh my gosh, we need to share this with so-and-so, and we need to show this for so-and-so. Yeah, no, they know.
So they actually like the woo on set, but then they just edit it out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there are those that, they're the people that are behind the cameras and the sound, and they're doing their job, and they're very much just in doing their work. And so I think they're just so focused on their job at hand that they're not noticing what's going on a lot of the time too. So you just have this core group of people that are kind of out there doing the experiments and the things, and they're seeing the guy getting doubled over and these kind of things happening. Like, that's something you're not going to see on the show as we're setting off the very first rocket to kind of poke the beehive, so to speak. So-and-so's doubling over because he's having this very physical effect on him that happened to him also on Skinwalker. These kind of things were happening over and over and over again, and you're not going to see that on the show. So yeah.
A lot of people tell us it's scripted, it's fake.
Oh no.
There's somebody there telling them what to do and what to say. No. And so you can confirm that there's no
I
acting.
was stunned by that. Not one time, well, the one time I shut up when I learned about the satanics, because I just went like, whoa, I'm sure they saw the blood come out of my, like, what are you thinking? Say it. And I'm like, I don't want this on camera. Other than that time, never once did they say, hey, Katie, say this or say that or do this, or none of that.
Did they do retakes to get a better reaction out of you?
Nope. Not one time. Never. Not one time. I was actually surprised by that. But they did film for several days and they had tons of footage. So I'm sure they could have cropped pieces here and there. And they actually didn't, though. When I've seen my episode twice now.
Yeah.
And I haven't really analyzed it too much. Typically, I don't even like to watch things that I do. Because, when you spend 3.5 years going over somebody's life work, like I did with Dr. Leo Sprinkle. So really quickly, I went there for selfish reasons to investigate the ranch, but I found myself lost in his letters from decades of people he had corresponded with. And when I looked at this man's life, and you realize how short life is, and all these wonderful things he did, TV shows he did, and this and that and the other thing, it's a flash of an eye. And in the end of the day, I asked Leo on his deathbed, basically, he passed away. I'm like, Leo, do you have any regrets? Because he dealt with the Phil classes, these debunkers. And he said, Katie, you're going to come across this in your journey. He goes, it's about the journey and the people you meet along the way. And just take it all in, take every experience for that moment. And that's the best you can do, and ignore the Phil classes of the world. And I really took him to heart, because Dr. Leo Sprinkle, he was such a genuine person. He would give you his time, his ear. He was just a wonderful soul. And I look to him every day for guidance on how to go through this. So when I go do a podcast or a TV show or anything like that, it's like, open the door, do it, and close it. And I don't look back, and I don't overthink it, and I don't judge it. And I just go move on to the next, to find the next answer or the next person that's going to have a piece of the puzzle. That's how I look at it.
Wow. No wonder you can handle all this strangeness. Yeah, you're at the center of all this strangeness because you're grounded and you figured it out.
Yeah. And I don't really care what anybody has to say. I'm just trying to figure it out for myself. So,
let us,
that comes with age.
Know if you do.
Yeah. Right. No, I think we'll be getting a lot of answers. So hang tight, everybody. This is going to be an interesting few years.
What do you think the end game is for you? Is a craft going to land on in your front yard, and a Blue Nordic is going to come out and invite you to?
No.
What's your end game?
It's a great question to ask me, because sometimes I feel like, well, the answers I was seeking, which mainly was how much of this is military, how much of this is paranormal. I think I have found some of those answers in that it's both. And so sometimes my desire to keep seeking is ebbing and flowing a little bit. But just when I start to think, like, for example, I was going to walk out of all this altogether when I moved up here and went through, all my whole life turned upside down, and I was going to go sell life insurance policies for a living. And it's like, think again, Katie. And then, ding-ling, you're going to, and so it's almost like the phenomenon won't let me off the hook, so to speak. And I hear this with other people too. So even if I try, something will happen. I'll be like, dang it, here I go again. So I enjoy it. I'm learning a lot. And if nothing else, it's interesting and fascinating. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, Charles, I've got to ask you a question real quick.
Yeah.
Can you explain the Ouija board on your wall?
I was noticing.
I don't think you had that before, and it really sticks out. Can you explain that? Talk about woo.
I put it up there because I thought it was cool. I have this Ouija board, and I won't use it. I had to do the research first, and I kind of looked into it, and I sort of played around with it a little bit, just enough to be like, this is not a good idea. But I'm going to swap it out, it just felt appropriate. So I hung it up there today. It wasn't up there before, but
I know I haven't seen it before.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, so Spirit Halloween, they always sell these great coffee mugs. I like a good big coffee mug. And I bought one that was the Ouija board. And just this morning, I put it in my Jeep to send it to the Goodwill, because I thought maybe it was bad juju to have in my house since all these weird things are happening. Anything with Ouija, I'm going to get it out. And I just did that this morning. Took my Ouija coffee mug out of the house, and there you have it on your wall.
Maybe I should get it out. I don't know. I don't know if you guys saw me here a few minutes ago. I was pulling one headphone off and listening. My cats are in here. Something was banging on the window over there for a good 2 minutes. I have no idea what it was. I'll check my cameras later. But there was something tapping. I live up in the woods. I have no idea what that was. That was some very weird noises. Yeah, that's one thing I haven't seen yet.
I haven't either, but I smelled one. I haven't seen one, but I
the skunk ape.
Something up in Bailey. Yep. It's a whole other story. Different show. Anyway, this has been fun.
Yeah,
Time
it was
has
great.
flew by. Time has
Thank
flew
you
by.
very
It
much
has.
for the time, and maybe we'll have you back at some point after disclosures farther along. We have other things to talk about too.
Right.
I'm wondering if they're going to contact you and say, hey, you want to do another episode of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, a follow-up? Because they need to.
I believe that is the hope. So if they get greenlit, I hope that will be a thing. And I'm also putting together a little team to go out and do some investigating this summer. So I'll keep you guys posted on what happens. So I would like to get Chuck Zukowski out there and perhaps Dr. Simeon Hine and a few others. Some of these people that I'm, interviewing and witnessing that have witnessed things to come out with us and have a group and see if we can't get some things documented. So I'll let you know what happens.
Oh yeah, awesome. Group would be good.
Yeah.
So how do people reach you? How do they get a hold of you? And you've got a book too. Can you kind of explain your book?
Yeah, the book, like I said, it's this particular book. I spent 3.5 years going through all the correspondence of Dr. Leo Sprinkle, and I organized them into chapters. I pulled out all the juicy parts of the letters, the correspondence, and I organized them into chapters. So there's like ET and craft descriptions, dreams or memories, implants, on hypnosis, letters from children, motives of all ET contacts. So it's called Letters of Love and Light. You can find it on my website. The link for it is on Amazon. Of course, you can get it on Amazon. And you can find me at Katie, Katie Paige, PAIGE.net. And you can contact me through my website.
And we'll add that link into the show notes.
It'd be awesome.
But thank you very much. It was great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it.
It was great. All right. Thank you so much.
Take care. Good luck tomorrow.
Thanks.
Bye.